Prologue. Cam clutched her study books tightly to her chest, as if they were her lifeline. Her soft brown hair hung loosely over her shoulders in gentle waves. Her head turned forward just a little, tipping some of her hair to shield her pale brown eyes from the world around her. Having lost her family just under a year back to Rogues, Cam wanted nothing more than to move on with life, get a job, and hopefully find her mate. Cam was abruptly pulled from her train of thought when someone smashed their towering body into her fragile one. Unable to find her footing, Cam flew forward. Dropping her books, she threw out her hands to stop herself from getting hurt. The study books hit the ground first with a heavy bang, followed closely by her gentle thud. "Watch it." The man growled deeply in his throat to her as she scrambled to pick up her books, not daring to look up at the towering form above her. Cam could only hear her heartbeat, which was pounding inside her chest. Anxiety rushed through her, causing her hands to sweat and her breathing to pick up. "Apologize to your future alpha, orphan." A screechy, high-pitched female voice stung through the air as Cam sat on her knees, pulling the last book to her chest and nodding her head softly, still keeping her eyes to the ground. "I apologize, Alpha. It will not happen again." Cam's gentle voice spoke softly as she waited to be forgiven by him so she could stand on her feet again. In the werewolf world, you must kneel before your alpha when asking for forgiveness. You cannot stand until the alpha says you are forgiven or they leave. Either way, this is to humble you so that you will never do what you did again. No words came from the alpha's mouth other than an annoyed grunt before he and his associates walked away from Cam, giggling and laughing at her. A single tear fell from her eye. A soft whimper escaped her throat as she stood to her feet and rushed to her locker, wanting to be anywhere else but here. "Don't worry, tomorrow is the big day. We will find our mate. Then everything will be fine. He will love and protect us." Kiera spoke in her mind gently. Kiera is Cam's wolf and has been her rock for so long, even more so since her parents' passing. "Here's hoping, Kiera." Cam whispered back to her as she put her books into the now-open locker and pulled out her jacket. She wrapped the puffy white coat tightly around her thin body and zipped it up. Cam grabbed her beige backpack and slung it over her shoulders before slamming her locker door shut and twisting the dial to lock it. Cam then turned around and made her way to the school's exit. She opened the doors and shivered at the bitter cold feeling of the winter air biting against her face. Her black boots crunched against the pure white snow as she walked over the parking lot while clutching her bag tighter to her body. Her cold, red hand moved up and softly tucked a piece of stray hair behind her ear. Her pale brown eyes watched her usual path home. Cam pulled her coat tighter around her as she walked to school. Today was her 17th birthday, and today was the day she found out her mate. To say she was nervous was a complete understatement. "Don't worry. He will love us. And he will protect us from those heathens." Kiera spoke gently to Cam as they saw the school ahead. "I hope you're right. I have lost my family. I don't know what I will do if he rejects me." Cam whispered gently, a hint of fear. Cam straightens herself before walking into the school's parking lot. It only took 2 seconds, and the most delicious scent filled her nose. It was a fresh smell of freshly squeezed limes with a hint of mint, so clean. It was bliss for Cam as her eyes scanned the area, hoping to find the source. Then she heard a growl as it ripped through the air before her upper arm was gripped tightly by a large, strong hand. Tingles rippled through her body, and she instantly knew the hand belonged to her mate. "It's him. It's our mate." Kiera screamed happily in Cam's mind as a small smile formed on Cam's lips. It only took a moment to realize her mate had just dragged her away from school and into the surrounding forest. She looked up at the tall man towering over her. His broad shoulders were perfect, exuding power. His arms were thick with muscle, and it was clear he worked out a lot. Suddenly, his hand released her arm, leaving her cold and wanting more of his touch. He never turned around to face her. Instead, he walked a few feet away. This action hurt Cam, but she did not let that show. "Why?" His deep voice ripped through the air. Cam was confused about what he meant. Before she could ask him anything, a deep growl that echoed through the forest emitted from him. "Why you?" he growled, turning around to face Cam with an almighty scowl on his face. Cam's heart instantly broke upon hearing those words from his lips. She did not look up to meet him, too afraid of what would come. "He won't," Kiera whimpered in Cam's head as silence fell onto them. "Look at me." That firm, commanding voice could only belong to one person. Cam's heart sank into her stomach, and her breathing caught in her throat. She reluctantly trailed her eyes up to meet the stone-cold gray eyes she feared the most. "Alpha," Cam whispered in surprise and fear as he towered over her. She stepped back and turned her head to the side to show her neck in submission. A deep growl emitted from the man before her, sending her heart to a new speed she had never felt. Anxiety rushed through her veins as her eyes teared up. He was supposed to be her mate, yet he acted as if he were utterly disgusted by her. "Pathetic, I refuse to have such a weak mate. I mean, how could you lead this pack by my side? You couldn't even protect your parents." He spat at her as Cam felt tears prick her eyes at the memories of her parents dying before her. Her breathing caught in her throat as his words ripped into her. "No." Her wolf cried as Cam's chin was grabbed forcefully by the Alpha, and she was made to look into his pale, cold gray eyes. "Please, don't," Cam begged him as a tear slipped down her creamy white cheek. She swore she saw something flash in his eyes at seeing her like this, desperate and defenseless to him. But that soon disappeared as if it were never there, and they returned to the stone-cold glare. "I, future Alpha Gabir Dawson of the River Red Pack, hereby," he began to speak. "Please don't, please," she begged as the Alpha continued his speech, as if she did not mutter a word to him. Her tears continued to roll faster down both her cheeks. "Under the witness of the moon goddess, reject you as a mate." He spat as soon as those words fell from his mouth. Cam felt her whole being break. Gabir threw her to the ground as if she were toxic, and Cam landed with a heavy thud. Cam did not move to stand up. She lay still for a moment before she burst into an ear-deafening scream of pain. Gabir turned his back and walked away from her as she howled in pain. She could feel the mate bond break within her. This pain was on a new level. This was worse than watching her parents being killed in front of her. Gabir stopped momentarily to look back as slight sorrow edged into his face, knowing he caused this pain to her. He watched her claw at her chest, as if to try to get to her heart. Her crying soon calmed to gentle sobs as Gabir turned to walk away again. "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry," she whimpered to him. This caught him completely by surprise. Why would she be apologizing to him when he was the one who was causing her this amount of pain? Shaking his head, he turned his back and walked away from the crying woman on the ground. Little did he know it would be the last time he saw her for a while after that morning. Cam never went back home, nor did she go to school. Cam just disappeared from the pack altogether without a single trace left behind. She holds tightly to her chest, as if they were her lifeline. Her soft brown hair hung loosely over her shoulders in gentle waves. Her head turned forward just a little, tipping some of her hair to shield her pale brown eyes from the world around her. Having lost her family just under a year back to Rogues, Cam wanted nothing more than to move on with life, get a job, and hopefully find her mate. Cam was abruptly pulled from her train of thought when someone smashed their towering body into her fragile one. Unable to find her footing, Cam flew forward. Dropping her books, she threw out her hands to stop herself from getting hurt. The study books hit the ground first with a heavy bang, followed closely by her gentle thud. "Watch it." The man growled deeply in his throat to her as she scrambled to pick up her books, not daring to look up at the towering form above her. Cam could only hear her heartbeat, which was pounding inside her chest. Anxiety rushed through her, causing her hands to sweat and her breathing to pick up. "Apologize to your future alpha, orphan." A screechy, high-pitched female voice stung through the air as Cam sat on her knees, pulling the last book to her chest and nodding her head softly, still keeping her eyes to the ground. "I apologize, Alpha. It will not happen again." Cam's gentle voice spoke softly as she waited to be forgiven by him so she could stand on her feet again. In the werewolf world, you must kneel before your alpha when asking for forgiveness. You cannot stand until the Alpha says you are forgiven or they leave. Either way, this is to humiliate you so that you will never do what you did again. No words came from the Alpha's mouth other than an annoyed grunt before he and his associates walked away from Cam, giggling and laughing at her. A single tear fell from her eye. A soft whimper escaped her throat as she stood to her feet and rushed to her locker, wanting to be anywhere else but here. Don't worry, tomorrow is the big day. We will find our mate. Then everything will be fine. He will love and protect us. Kiera spoke in her mind gently. Kiera is Cam's wolf and has been her rock for so long, even more so since her parents' passing. Here's hoping, Kiera. Cam whispered back to her as she put her books into the now-open locker and pulled out her jacket. She wrapped the puffy white coat tightly around her thin body and zipped it up. Cam grabbed her beige backpack and slung it over her shoulders before slamming her locker door shut and twisting the dial to lock it. Cam then turned around and made her way to the school's exit. She opened the doors and shivered at the bitter cold feeling of the winter air biting against her face. Her black boots crunched against the pure white snow as she walked over the parking lot while clutching her bag tighter to her body. Her cold, red hand moved up and softly tucked a piece of stray hair behind her ear. Her pale brown eyes watched her usual path home. Cam pulled her coat tighter around her as she walked to school. Today was her 17th birthday, and today was the day she found out her mate. To say she was nervous was a complete understatement. Don't worry. He will love us. And he will protect us from those heathens. Kiera spoke gently to Cam as they saw the school ahead. I hope you're right. I have lost my family. I don't know what I will do if he rejects me. Cam whispered gently, a hint of fear. Cam straightens herself before walking into the school's parking lot. It only took 2 seconds, and the most delicious scent filled her nose. It was a fresh smell of freshly squeezed limes with a hint of mint, so clean. It was bliss for Cam as her eyes scanned the area, hoping to find the source. Then she heard a growl as it ripped through the air before her upper arm was gripped tightly by a large, strong hand. Tingles rippled through her body, and she instantly knew the hand belonged to her mate. It's him. It's our mate. Kiera screamed happily in Cam's mind as a small smile formed on Cam's lips. It only took a moment to realize her mate had just dragged her away from school and into the surrounding forest. She looked up at the tall man towering over her. His broad shoulders were perfect, exuding power. His arms were thick with muscle, and it was clear he worked out a lot. Suddenly, his hand released her arm, leaving her cold and wanting more of his touch. He never turned around to face her. Instead, he walked a few feet away. This action hurt Cam, but she did not let that show. Why? His deep voice ripped through the air. Cam was confused about what he meant. Before she could ask him anything, a deep growl that echoed through the forest emitted from him. Why you? He growled, turning around to face Cam with an almighty scowl on his face. Cam's heart instantly broke upon hearing those words from his lips. She did not look up to meet him, too afraid of what would come. He won't, Kiera whimpered in Cam's head as silence fell onto them. Look. At. Me. That firm, commanding voice could only belong to one person. Cam's heart sank into her stomach, and her breathing caught in her throat. She reluctantly trailed her eyes up to meet the stone-cold gray eyes she feared the most. Alpha, Cam whispered in surprise and fear as he towered over her. She stepped back and turned her head to the side to show her neck in submission. A deep growl emitted from the man before her, sending her heart to a new speed she had never felt. Anxiety rushed through her veins as her eyes teared up. He was supposed to be her mate, yet he acted as if he were utterly disgusted by her. Pathetic, I refuse to have such a weak mate. I mean, how could you lead this pack by my side? You couldn't even protect your parents. He spat at her as Cam felt tears prick her eyes at the memories of her parents dying before her. Her breathing caught in her throat as his words ripped into her. No. Her wolf cried as Cam's chin was grabbed forcefully by the Alpha, and she was made to look into his pale, cold gray eyes. Please. Don't. Cam begged him as a tear slipped down her creamy white cheek. She swore she saw something flash in his eyes at seeing her like this, desperate and defenseless to him. But that soon disappeared as if it were never there, and they returned to the stone-cold glare. "I, future Alpha Gabir Dawson of the River Red Pack, hereby," he began to speak. "Please don't, please," she begged as the Alpha continued his speech, as if she did not mutter a word to him. Her tears continued to roll faster down both her cheeks. "Under the witness of the moon goddess, reject you as a mate." He spat as soon as those words fell from his mouth. Kim felt her whole being break. Gabir threw her to the ground as if she were toxic, and Kim landed with a heavy thud. Kim did not move to stand up. She lay still for a moment before she burst into an ear-deafening scream of pain. Gabir turned his back and walked away from her as she howled in pain. She could feel the mate bond break within her. This pain was on a new level. This was worse than watching her parents being killed in front of her. Gabir stopped momentarily to look back as slight sorrow edged into his face, knowing he caused this pain to her. He watched her claw at her chest, as if to try to get to her heart. Her crying soon calmed to gentle sobs as Gabir turned to walk away again. "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry," she whimpered to him. This caught him completely by surprise. Why would she be apologizing to him when he was the one who was causing her this amount of pain? Shaking his head, he turned his back and walked away from the crying woman on the ground. Little did he know it would be the last time he saw her for a while after that morning. Kim never went back home, nor did she go to school. Kim just disappeared from the pack altogether without a single trace left behind. Chapter 1. Howls ripped tightly through the thick foggy air as footsteps ran away from many running wolf paws. The smell of blood thickened the air as it dripped down the arm of a young woman. She ran desperately through the dense forest as she dodged the trees and leapt over a fallen tree, only to stumble slightly, giving the wolves behind her enough time to catch up with her. "Goddamn rogues!" She growled loudly with a hiss as she continued in her flight from her hunters. "Come on, come on, come on," she growled to herself, pushing her feet a little faster. But then she felt something hard knock against her shoulder, causing her to roll onto the floor. She rolled onto her knees and flipped her long brown hair over her head, looking up to her hunters. She spots 4 rogues growling at her. Standing ready to jump, she waited for the rogues to make their moves. One rushed at her as she launched herself into the air, leaping over the wolf and pulling out a blade from her boot. She dropped down onto the wolf's back and pushed the knife deep into its flesh. The wolf fell to the ground with a thud and lay motionless. The woman jumped up and made quick work of the following 2 wolves, leaving the last one baring its teeth at her with a growl. "Come on, you brute!" She growled at the wolf, who barked back and jumped at her. The woman ducked to the ground. But the wolf managed to get the upper hand and pin her down. The wolf did not hesitate to sink its teeth into her shoulder deeply, earning a howling scream of pain from the woman before she mustered the last of her remaining strength and plunged her blade into the wolf's heart. It became limp and lifeless on top of her as she pushed it off and rolled onto her feet. "God damn it all!" She cursed under her breath as she held her, now profusely bleeding left shoulder and arm, which hung limply. Her once crisp white t-shirt was dyed red by the blood she had spilt and her own. The woman has now ripped her black leather jacket to shreds. Her skinny black jeans were covered in mud and forest flooring as she took wobbly steps in a random direction. Her vision became more and more blurry from the blood loss as she swayed from side to side, like a drunken sailor. She stopped when she heard growls once again sound through the air. But by their smell, they were not rogues. They belonged to a pack. But which pack she did not know. She seemed more lucid when she realized she was not out of danger yet. "Oh, for goodness sake," she yelled as she looked up at the moon in the sky. "Do you seriously hate me that much? God damn it, give me a break." She growled in annoyance as she tried to keep her guard up. She waited as she knew that whoever the wolves were, they were right in front of her. Not a moment later, a gray wolf trotted forward from behind the trees, baring its teeth at her. The gray wolf stopped just as a large man walked out from the same area as the wolf, dressed in nothing but basketball shorts. His body was on show with well-toned abs and chest muscles that rippled with anger at every deep breath. His fists clenched and unclenched carefully as if channeling his anger through them. "Who are you? And what business do you have in this territory, rogue?" He growled lowly to the woman who smirked with her blood-red lips and white teeth. "What pack is this?" she asked gently, still with her smirk. "I ask the questions around here." The man boomed at her, taking a single step forward, trying to intimidate her into submission. But the woman stood her ground. "I will decide my business with this pack once I find its identity. But I can assure you, I cannot harm any of you in this state," she explained, taking her hand off her wound and pointing a single, bloody finger towards it. "These lands belong to Alpha Gabir of the River Red Pack," the man said with pride, and saw the woman's visible flinch at his words. Her eyes flashed with a haze, and her face dropped from its smirk. "I see, then I have no business here," she muttered as she turned around and began walking away from the patrol of 11. "See, that's the thing, rogue. Now, you can only leave this territory in a body bag," the man explained as the woman gently shook her head. "Well, not entirely true, seeing as I have done it before," she laughed, turning around to face him. "Who the hell are you? What is your name?" he called, clearly angry at her as she just laughed. He growled and took another step forward, clenching his fists tighter to cause his knuckles to whiten. "You don't remember me, Joel." She laughed loudly with a roll of her eyes at seeing him completely stunned. The beta of the second largest pack was stunned at a loss for words. "Okay, take away the red lipstick and this blood, add a few. How should I put this? Colorful pieces of clothing, and then you get me," she spoke with a new sparkle in her brown eyes. "Cam," Joel whispered in amazement at the girl before him. Last he saw her, a weak little girl with barely any confidence or fighting skills. But now, standing before him was another woman entirely. She was adorned with red lips darker than blood and dressed in leather. She now had a "don't interfere with me" look and feel around her. Her brown hair was longer and fuller as he took in her appearance. "Bingo! We have a winner." Cam laughed before hissing in pain at her shoulder. After a few seconds of composing herself, she looked to Joel. "Now, I think I will be leaving," she muttered and turned around. "Wait, what happened to you? You just vanished," he asked, confused. "Oh, so the big bad Alpha did not tell you?" She chuckled, leaning on a nearby tree for support as the blood loss slowly took over. "Tell us what?" Joel growled impatiently. "Oh, I don't know, just that he found his mate one fateful day and decided to reject her point blank without a single worry in the world." She hissed at remembering that morning almost a year and a half ago. "Tell me, how's the man? Still with the associate Jessica?" Kim squeezed out as it became harder even to see. Kim turned her head after no response to see Joel's eyes slightly glazed over, showing he was mind-linking someone. Just then, a howl gripped the air. It was loud and compelling, meaning it could only come from one person. "Darn it. I gotta go. Bye, everyone," she called, then found a new burst of energy and ran off. Her speed was still slow but fast enough to keep her going. "Stop her. Do not let her escape, Alpha's orders." Joel called out as Kim kept running, but Kim soon began to slow, blood loss and exhaustion from not sleeping or eating for 2 days taking their toll. "Darn it," she growled as she tripped and fell onto her wounded side, letting out a whimper of pain. Cam could barely keep her eyes open as Joel rushed over to her with an annoyed look in his eyes. Joel moved a hand out to touch her, but Kim found her strength and punched him in the face while rolling over onto her front. Joel had fallen back and landed on his rear with a grunt. He gripped his bloody nose as he looked at Cam. He was impressed that she could muster enough strength to break his nose even in her weak state of blood loss. "Don't touch me," Cam growled as blackness consumed her vision completely, and she fell into unconsciousness. Chapter 2. Cam's eyes felt like sandpaper as she slowly opened them. Cam blinked several times to regain her focus as the dark room looked blurry. Her legs felt heavy as she tried to move, only to find that they were restricted by something wrapped around her ankles. She jolted upright to look at them, only to find iron clamps clasping her wrists to a chain. Looking down at her attire, she noticed she was not wearing a shirt but had a large bandage wrapped around her wounded shoulder and chest, leaving her stomach open to the cold, damp air. "Hello," she yelled out, feeling her vocal cords rub against each other like grit. She coughed a little to try to stop the itching. Kim looked over to the large metal door as the footsteps stopped outside. The door opened reluctantly before two enormous, stocky men entered the room. Kim watched as their dark, shadowy figures walked to the foot of her bed and stood, watching her. "Are you guys gonna talk? Or are you going to be standing there staring at me all night?" Kim huffed, getting irritated by their unmoving stare. "It's hard to believe that is her." The one and only Joel spoke to his companion, who seemed to nod in agreement. It was hard to see who they were as the room was dark, and Cam's vision was not fully back yet. "So, you gonna tell me who your almighty friend is, Joel?" Cam asked, bending her knees slightly as she sat up, tugging against her restraints. Growls ripped through the air at how she addressed the beta of the pack, but Cam just laughed. "What happened to you, Cam?" Joel asked with curiosity in his voice. He was curious about how the lonely little wallflower had become this tough, rude woman. "I grew up. Life is not a kind and gentle one with easy living when you're a rogue." Cam spat at him with a growl in his direction. "We can see that from your scars." Joel chuckled at her new attitude, which he felt suited her much better. "Too damn right. Lucky attackers got the drop on me. But they won't be able to do it again." Cam shrugged her shoulders only to hiss in pain from her wounded shoulder. The truth was, they were getting the drop on her more and more as time passed. "You have been out for 2 days, you should have healed by now." Joel asked, confused as to why her wound had not healed a day after she got it. She did not answer him as she turned her head to look at the wall. "Yeah, that was all," Kim whispered as the room fell into silence. Through the ear-biting silence, the door opened again. One of the two men left the room, leaving the other man still in the room. "You've changed, Cam." The unknown figure spoke softly as she walked forward to her. Cam's back stiffened, and all her muscles tensed at his voice. "My wolf wants to speak with yours." The voice gently spoke as he stopped and knelt at her level. The moon's light shone over his features from the small square window at the top of the room. "Gabir," Cam growled as her nostrils flared in anger, and he smirked. "No, he can't speak to her." "Okay, let me rephrase that. My wolf will speak with yours." Gabir smirked at her as Cam shook her head and turned away from him. "He can't." She spoke again, her voice seeming to crack slightly. "Are you denying your alpha?" he asked with a snarl, trying to intimidate her into submission. "Ex-alpha, don't forget and know," she said, looking down at the ground. "I can't deny what I don't have." "What do you mean by don't have?" Gabir asked with a confused look plastered onto his face as he silently breathed in, smelling that mouth-watering smell of strawberries and chocolate he had missed so much. But over that, there was a hint of salty tears, showing Cam was trying hard to keep them back. "That day, you rejected me," Cam began as she stopped momentarily. A sharp pain rushed through both of their hearts from the memory of that day. "I not only lost my mate, but since then, Kiara, my wolf, has not talked to me. I tried to contact her, but it is like she's dead," Cam whispered, and Gabir looked down with a nasty scowl on his face. "He caused this. He was the reason the once gentle daisy is now a deadly rose. Because of you, I only have myself in this god-forsaken world," Cam muttered as a single tear escaped its prison and fell down her cheek gently. It made sense to Gabir why she did not recognize him by his scent, or that she could not see him in this dim, dark light, or as to why she was taking so long to heal. "Your wolf," he whispered as he watched Cam try to hold it together and bottle it up. This was his doing. He caused this lonely pain and suffering. If he had not been thoughtless and rejected her, she would be happy and smiling with him by his side, possibly even with children. But here she was, broken and wounded beyond repair. "Just leave," she cracked out to him as he sighed deeply and stood to his feet. Gabir moved to place a hand on her cheek, but she pulled away like he was deadly fire with a hiss. "Don't touch me." You have no right after what you've done to me. She snarled at him as he dropped his hand and stood up. She was right. After what he had done to her, he was surprised she was even tolerating his presence right now. I will have someone bring you some food. He spoke as he opened the door. Don't bother. She spoke to him, looking away, unable to even look at the man who wrecked what remaining life she had left. The door closed and left Cam alone in the dark again. By this point in her life, she had learned to embrace the cold darkness as a companion. She closed her eyes. Several tears escaped as she drifted away into a dreamless state. Gabir. Son, is it true? You've found Kamara? Gabir's father asked as he walked into his son's office to see him sitting at his desk doing paperwork. Yes, Joel found her badly wounded on the borders during a patrol. We're holding her in the cells for safety. He spoke without looking up from his work. Damon. Gabir's father was best friends with Cam's father when he was still alive. So when Cam disappeared, Damon tried hard to find her. Why is she in a cell? She should be in the hospital getting help. Damon began to argue. Gabir just shook his head with a glum look on his face. She is there for her safety and our safety. She has been away from this pack for a while. We don't know who she could be associated with. Gabir explained to his father. Until I know for sure she is not a threat to the pack, she will be moved. Damon could see that Gabir was only looking out for the pack. Damon then walked over to Gabir's desk and sat in one of the chairs in front of it. Gab, there is a rumor flying around the pack house, Damon asked as Gabir continued to write on the paper. Dad, you know rumors are always flying about this house. It's all they ever do. Gabir muttered. Well, this one is saying that Cam was your mate, and the reason she disappeared was that you rejected her, Damon explained, catching Gabir off guard. How did that get out so fast? Please tell us that is not true, that this rumor has just been made up to make you look bad. His father said as Gabir placed his pen down and ran his hands through his long brown hair. His gray eyes met his father's, whose face grew angry. It's true, I did reject her back then, he told him. Now his father was seething with rage toward his son. His nostrils flared with anger as he clenched his fists to control the urge to strike his son. Do you even know what happens when a mate is rejected? Damon asked his son, who shook his head gently. Well, let me refresh your memory. Once a mate is rejected, it takes 2 years of agonizing pain before the wolf finally dies. Then the human part will only last a week, and this pain you cannot even imagine. All the while, the mate that rejected their other half is left unaffected. His father's voice grew louder by the second until he was yelling at him. The amount of pain Cam has gone through, even to get this far, is unreal. It's unlike anything you have felt before. Once she dies, you will feel empty and helpless for the rest of your miserable life. Gabir looked like the world had just collapsed from under his feet. How do you know this? Gabir asked him carefully as his father stood up and turned his back. My sister, your aunt. Her mate rejected her. I had to watch as she endured unimaginable pain, and I could do nothing about it. It broke my heart, but she said having family there made it much more bearable for her. He spoke about the memory. But Cam was and is alone with no one. She has no family and now no mate or wolf. Gabir spoke, looking down. Which makes it even more painful. I'm surprised Cam has not taken her own life by now. He spoke to his son. This realization hurt him deeply in a way he never knew was possible. Damon looked to his son, who felt broken inside at what he had caused. And all because she was not popular at school, and he thought it would hurt his reputation to have a mate like her. I don't think I have ever been this disappointed in you before, Gabir. I thought I taught you better. Your mother and I will be leaving. We are going to meet with friends. Damon told his son quietly, in a disappointed tone. I don't know when we'll be back or even if we will. Damon opened the door to Gabir's office, but stopped and turned to look back at him. I thought we had raised you better than this, his father said before he turned and left Gabir's office. Gabir sank his face into his hands with a deep, heavy sigh. Tears pricked at his eyes. What have I done? He whispered, thoroughly regretting his decision to reject his mate. Chapter 3. Cam, it's been 3 days, and you have not eaten anything. Please, you have to eat something. Joel spoke as he stood beside Cam, holding a tray of food. Granted, it was nothing special, but it was some tomato soup, and, even then, it was most likely more than she was used to having. I'm not hungry. That was all Cam said to Joel before he sighed and sat down. He crossed his legs as the cold, damp flooring nipped at him. Look, Cam. I want to apologize for the way I treated you in school. I know that it must have been hard, Joel spoke. Hard? Cam interrupted Joel with a deep chuckle. You have no idea what it feels like to have no one to depend on or talk to. You have your wolf, do you not? Joel said, trying to prove a point, but Cam just shook her head at him. You don't have your wolf? She disappeared the moment he rejected me. Her heart was broken because the man who was supposed to love and protect us didn't want us. Cam sighed as Joel remained silent. I know how it all goes, rejection. I have 6 months and 28 days until she passes away completely. And then, a week later, I follow. Cam spoke as she looked at Joel, who sat surprised. Cam chuckled, knowing Joel had no idea what happened when a mate was rejected. You see, when a mate is rejected, it takes a full 2 years of deep pain and sorrow for the rejected's wolf to fade. Then the human side goes through even more struggle as half of their soul dies. It does not take too long before the human side gives up. All while the person that does the rejection does not feel a thing. Cam informed him, scrunching his forehead in both anger and surprise. Why would he do such a thing? Joel growled, clearly upset at Cam's mate for hurting her in such a way. I guess even the moon goddess has it out for me. My life has been difficult since my parents died. Cam whispered as she rested her head against the cold cell wall and closed her eyes. Silence fell over her and Joel quickly. It was not an awkward silence, nor a comfortable one. Look, Cam. I will talk to Alpha Gabir to see if we can get you out of this cell. But first, I want you to eat some of this. Joel bargained with her, but Cam only met him with silence. Fine, Cam whispered as she shuffled painfully to take the warm bowl of soup. She used the spoon to grab a bite and relish the taste. I will also see about getting you some medication, Joel said as he stood up and walked away from Cam, who continued eating. Joel walked away from her cell and out towards the pack house. He knew Gabir would be completing the stacks of paperwork in his large office. With 3 knocks, Joel waited outside the large wooden door until a voice called him in. He walked in to find Gabir sitting at his desk, only this time, instead of a pen in his hand, it was a bottle of Scotch whiskey. Gab? Joel asked as he walked over to Gabir. Gabir lifted his head to see his best friend looking at him with concern. I think we should let Cam out of the cells. She is suffering down there, barely eating anything, Joel said, sinking into a chair at the front of Gabir's desk. Cam is not a threat to the pack, or a rescue squad would be at our borders by now. She is a rogue, Joel. Gabir spoke gently as if the words were stuck in his mouth. Gabir, she is in a lot of pain. Her mate rejected her, and she says she has only 6 months and 28 days left until her wolf fades. Joel began as Gabir sank his head deeper into his hands. I think we should let her spend the rest of the days she has left here in comfort. That way, we can be around to help her, Joel said, nodding. Gabir finally broke, hearing Joel's words. Tears began to fall down his cheeks, catching Joel entirely by surprise. Gab, are you all right? He asked, unsure how to react to seeing his best friend like this for the first time. This is all my fault, Gabir cried as he placed his forehead on the edge of his desk. Wait, are you saying what she said back at the borders is true? That you are the mate that rejected her? Joel said, stunned at this sudden realization. He could not believe that his best friend and Alpha had not once said anything about this to him. Yes, Gabir cried as Joel sighed, then stood up and walked over to his friend. Joel carefully embraced him in a hug as Gabir broke down for the first time in a long time. I've made such a big mistake, Joel. Even though I rejected her, I never really forgave myself for what I did. Gabir explained through sobs. And now that she is here, I feel everything from that day again. She was in so much pain. And it's all my fault, Gabir said through shallow breaths as he continued to cry. You will never be able to make her forgive you, Joel said, pulling away from him. But you can start trying to put right your wrong by getting her out of that cold cell and into a warm room. And some medication too. You're right, Gabir said, wiping his face and straightening his back, but all the rooms in the house are full. I don't even have any on my floor. Then I guess you should give her your room. That is unless you are all right with her staying with another wolf. Joel shrugged as Gabir growled at the thought. I may have rejected her, but I will not let her stay with anyone else while under this roof. He growled, and Joel laughed at his shifting personality. I will go and take her from the cells. I am sure the pack doctor will give her some medicine to help her heal, and with the pain, that should give you time to think of a sleeping situation for her. Joel told him as he left the office and walked back to the cells to get Cam. Joel thought back to how they treated Cam when she was younger, but looking at her now, Joel was sure Cam was no longer the quiet girl who would take the mistreatment everyone dished out. Now she would undoubtedly stand up for herself. She was now a confident woman with red lips dressed in leather. Chapter 4. Cam, I managed to get you out of here. But under the condition that you stay within the pack house. 3 warriors will be tailing you if you want to go out. Joel spoke as he walked into her cell. Cam looked at him through tired eyes and nodded gently. At this point, she was just happy to get out of the damp cell. Joel smiled softly and walked over to her shackles, unlocking them quickly. Cam sighed as they fell from her skin and looked up to Joel with dull yet feisty eyes. Thanks. That was all Cam said as she weakly pushed herself to her feet. Joel saw her struggle and gripped her right arm to help her up. You all right? Joel asked, concerned for the woman who just smiled. I have bad days, but they seem to become more frequent, Cam spoke quietly as she moved forward, reaching for the wall to steady herself. Joel watched her struggle to move and wondered how she coped with her bad days alone in the wild. Where are we going? Cam asked Joel, sounding out of breath. Joel then remembered as he pulled out a shirt from his back pocket. We are going to the pack doctor first to get you some medication. He told her and pushed the shirt toward her. Here, put this on. He spoke, and Cam took the white shirt and pulled it over her head. The shirt was almost 3 sizes too big, falling below her hips. She then caught a scent of lime and mint, instantly knowing to whom this shirt belonged. Come on, Joel said, walking over to her and stopping at her side. You are tired as it is, Joel spoke before quickly pulling Cam into his arms, holding her against his chest. Joel carried her like she weighed nothing more than a feather as they walked out of the cells and into the summer air. Where have you been? Joel asked curiously. Cam looked up as he continued to train his eyes forward in their direction. She dropped her head to look at her hands while giving off a gentle sigh. Here and there, just getting along. Cam shrugged as she thought back to the past year and a half. How did you get that scar? He asked in a serious tone and Cam smirked. I have many scars, Joel. All from defending myself against those who don't know when to give in. Cam chuckled as Joel cracked a faint smile as they walked into the pack house. A small part of me has missed this place, Cam said, looking around the house, not at the people staring at her with confused, threatening glares. As they rounded the corner into a long hall, a trio of girls stood talking. They quickly noticed Joel holding Cam and glared at her. Who's this person? One asked as she giggled with her friends. Before Joel could get a word in to tell them to shut up and that this was a guest of the Alpha, Cam beat him to it. Looking for trouble, sweet cheeks? Cam fired back as she wriggled her way out of Joel's arms to stand on her feet shakily. At least I have some self-respect, Cam said while looking at them with distaste. Says the rogue clinging to our beta? The girls spat with an evil glare. Cam turned to face the woman, who wore a shirt several sizes too small and a pair of very short shorts. Please, everyone knows your reputation. You can't keep to yourself for more than 5 minutes, Cam smirked as the woman seemed to grow angrier every second. How dare you speak to me like that? One day, I will be the Luna of this pack. So you should show me some respect. She spat and snarled simultaneously, while Cam just burst into fits of laughter while holding her stomach. Please, the only respect I have for you disappeared the moment I saw your face. Cam spoke as the woman's face grew red with anger. I cannot believe Gabir's standards have fallen this low. Cam laughed as a smile seemed to crack onto Joel's lips as he watched the scene unfold with his arms crossed over his chest. "You brat." The woman yelled, and Cam looked at her with a simple smirk. "Yup, that's me," Cam said and winked at her. This sent the girl over the edge, and she ran at Cam. Joel loosened his arms and prepared to intervene, but as the girl neared Cam, she only smiled. She never moved as she watched the girl run at her. Joel could see that she was handling herself well. The old Cam avoided conflict of any kind, but he preferred this version of Cam. Cam bent her knees and sent a firm blow to the girl's middle, sending her to the floor. Cam quickly pinned the girl down and looked her in the eye, less than an inch from her face. "I don't play around. I fight for real." "You are so lucky that I'm in pain, because if I wasn't," Cam growled and leaned down to her ear as the girl struggled. "I would make sure you never bothered me again. Do not forget that I am a rogue. Pack rules don't apply to me anymore." Cam smirked as she released the girl and stood up. Cam stretched her sore muscles, then chuckled and walked away. "I can't believe you just stood there watching," baited Joel. "You let a rogue manhandle your future Luna." The woman growled at him, her disapproval plain. "Oh, please," Joel spoke with fake concern as he stepped closer to her. "As soon as she arrived back on our territory, you lost that title." Joel smirked and walked away from her. "I'm going to tell Gabir," she yelled as she stormed away towards the Alpha's office. Joel chuckled at the thought of Gabir dismissing her. She did not seem to understand that even before Kim returned, she had no chance at the Luna title. She was undeserving of such a title when she lacked the character for it. "You still know your way around?" Joel said as he caught up with Cam. "Yeah, it's hard to forget," Cam spoke as she slowed to a stop and sighed. "What you did back there?" Joel started as Cam raised an eyebrow at him. "If you expect me to apologize, you can forget that idea," Cam told him as Joel smirked. "You have changed a lot, haven't you?" Joel spoke to her as Cam nodded in return. "You haven't seen the full new me yet," Cam called loudly with a full smile as Joel returned it. "Can't wait." Joel smirked as he then followed Cam towards the pack doctor.
Author Insight. The line between a sanctuary and a prison is often just a matter of who holds the key. In this chapter, Cam moves into the most intimate territory possible, the Alpha's private wing. But as you listen, notice the irony. She is surrounded by modern luxury and the finest comforts, yet she is physically and spiritually fading away. We are about to see a rare, quiet vulnerability from both sides. While Cam tries to maintain her walls, her body and her subconscious are starving for the very connection that broke her. Watch for the moment that California King bed becomes a battlefield of instinct versus memory.
Chapter 5. "Gabir has said you will need to stay in his room as there are no free rooms at the moment," Joel said as he stopped halfway up the stairs. "What?" Cam spoke as she also stopped on the stairs a few steps up. "The top floor only has 2 rooms, Gabir's and my own," Joel said as he looked at Cam before continuing up the stairs. Cam grumbled under her breath as she followed Joel closely. "Just as long as he keeps his distance and sleeps on the floor," she hissed. Joel laughed and stopped at the top of the stairs. The wide, open living area was effortlessly modern, with creamy beige colors accented with brown wood. The cream leather sofa surrounded a glass table on a fluffy white rug. Deep brown laminate flooring lined the room before cream walls held up the white roof. A large flat-screen TV hung on a wall facing the sofa, along with a large gray stone fireplace. As they stood on the landing, she noticed the large windows on the furthest wall. "So, to the left is my wing," Joel said, pointing to a closed wooden door across from the fireplace. "And to the right will be Gabir's wing, and now your wing." He pointed to an identical door. "Come on, I will show you around," Joel said, placing a hand on her back to guide her. He opened the door to reveal a cream-colored hallway with dark wood skirting and a soft carpet. The hall was lit with a warm golden glow. 3 dark wood doors framed the space, one at the very end and 2 facing each other. "Okay, so the one on the left is Gabir's office, gaming, and private living room, along with his kitchen." Joel told her the place was a smaller version of the main living room. Joel closed that door and opened the next. And this is the bathroom, which also joins onto the bedroom. He showed her a warm cream and beige bathroom, with tiles lining the floor and walls. A shower stood in the corner, with a large white jacuzzi bath against a window that filled most of the wall. Now, for the bedroom, Joel said, guiding Cam to the last door. When she opened it, Cam was stunned by its simple beauty. For a man, the room was in good taste. An off-white carpet covered the floor, and an old wooden chest sat at the foot of a giant California king bed. Black and white patterned sheets draped the bed, an array of pillows. A crystal chandelier hung from the middle of the ceiling, and 2 large bedside lamps stood on tables. A large flat-screen TV hung on the wall facing the bed, with a set of drawers beneath. The large windows looked out over the forests behind the house. "It's beautiful," Cam said, confused. "I was expecting something not like this." "Well, I will leave you here," Joel said. He nodded and turned toward the door. "Wait," Cam called before going over to him. "Could you do me a huge favor? I need you to go and pick something up. Do you have a piece of paper or somewhere I can put an address?" Joel nodded and pulled out his phone. He opened a note and handed it to Cam, who entered the address. "What is it I need to get?" Joel asked. "I need you to pick up my bike. You took the keys when you found me," Cam said. Joel nodded and turned away. "I will get it right now," Joel said as he walked away, closing the door behind him. Cam smiled and turned back to the room. She walked over to the bed and sat down. It had been such a long time since she had slept on a bed rather than the ground. Cam kicked off her boots and lay back, curling into a ball as she drifted off into a gentle sleep. "Gabir, Cam asked me to go and get her something out of town." "I won't be long," Joel said as he passed Gabir on the stairs. Gabir nodded as he walked up the stairs toward the right wing. When he opened the first door, he was hit with the sweet scent of strawberries and chocolate. He smiled, quietly walked to his room, and opened the door to see Cam sleeping on his bed. He walked over to her and looked down at her sleeping form. "I'm so sorry. I should never have hurt you as I did," Gabir spoke gently and truthfully as he brushed the back of his fingers over her cheek. A spark of connection hit him as soon as they touched, bringing a smile to his lips. Cam shifted slightly, leaning into his touch, making a soft sound of comfort. Gabir cupped her cheek and moved his thumb over her skin. He looked at her features, thinking of Cam when she was younger. She had changed so much, growing into a strong and striking woman. "So beautiful," he whispered as he leaned down and gently placed a kiss on her forehead. He felt a pang of regret knowing the pain she was going through. He stood up and walked toward the door. "Please stay," Cam whispered in her sleep. Gabir stopped, unsure of what to do. He knew the right thing was to leave and sleep on the sofa, but her plea was difficult to resist. Gabir carefully walked back to the bed. He removed his shirt and maneuvered onto the bed to lie down next to her, keeping a distance between them. However, Cam moved closer to him and rested her head on his chest, seeking his warmth. The connection between them was powerful. Gabir wrapped his arms around her and pulled her close, breathing in her scent before finding himself beginning to drift off into a peaceful sleep. Everything felt right at that moment, having Cam in his arms. For a moment, his whole world felt complete.
Author's insight. The most dangerous thing in this room isn't Gabir, it's the biological pull of a broken bond. When Cam whispers, "Please stay," in her sleep, she isn't forgiving him with her mind, she's reaching out with her dying soul. Gabir's choice to stay in the bed is a massive risk. He's feeding a connection that he technically revoked, creating a moment of peace that will likely make the morning's reality even more painful. End of chapter analysis. This chapter highlights a tragic paradox. The very man who is the source of Cam's terminal illness is also the only source of the warmth her body instinctively craves. The setting of the Alpha's wing, modern, luxurious, and isolated, emphasizes how much Cam has missed out on. She was living in the dirt while her mate was living in a palace. Gabir's behavior here shows a man caught between his alpha instincts and his newfound guilt. Touching her while she sleeps is an invasion of her boundaries, Yet the spark he feels confirms that the bond hasn't completely severed, it's just bleeding out. For Gabir, this is a moment of completion, but for Cam, this is a subconscious betrayal of her own resolve. She wants to hate him, but her wolf, even if silent, is still wired to find home in his arms. This temporary peace is a fragile illusion that ignores the 6-month countdown ticking in the background. Audience engagement questions. Cam made Joel promise to keep Gabir away, but in her sleep, she begged him to stay. Is it possible for her heart to forgive him even if her mind never does? Why do you think Cam is so determined to get her bike back? Is it her escape plan, or just the last piece of her rogue identity she has left? Gabir feels complete with her in his arms. Does he deserve to feel that peace after what he put her through? If Cam wakes up and finds him in bed with her, do you think she'll revert to the feisty rogue, or will the bond keep her calm? Transition teaser. The sun will eventually rise on this moment of peace, and when it does, the cold reality of the rejection will be waiting at the bedroom door.
Chapter 6. Cam smiled as a warmth spread through her body, accompanied by soft, pleasant sensations. She moved to pull the pillow she was hugging closer to her face, but stopped when she realized a few things. 1. Pillows are not this warm. 2. The pillows are not firm. And 3. Pillows do not breathe. What the hell? Cam yelled as she flung her eyes open to see Gabir. She pushed against his chest and threw him off the bed. She rolled the opposite way and landed on her feet. What the? Gabir yelled as he awoke with a start. He jumped to his feet and looked around as if something were happening. Cam glared at him, a low growl forming in her throat. You've got to be kidding me, she yelled at him. Gabir loosened his tensed muscles, seeing there was no danger apart from the raging woman in front of him. Do not speak to me like that, Gabir warned her as he stepped forward, annoyed at Cam's tone. I will talk to you however I want. No alpha who rejected his mate will tell me what to do, she yelled. A growl ripped from Gabir's throat. You will hold your tongue. Gabir growled, using his alpha authority on Cam to force her into submission. But Cam was not in his pack. She was a rogue, which meant that even though the words still held weight, she did not feel compelled to obey them. Don't you dare. Never use that tone on me. Cam growled in a low, dangerous voice, pointing her finger toward him. They both walked around the bed to stand no less than a foot away from each other. You were once a member of this pack. Therefore, you still have obligations to this pack, Gabir hissed at her, looking down with an intimidating glare. His jaw clenched as he tried to hold back his anger. You will listen to me. Cam just burst into laughter at his words. I was once a member of the pack, Cam exaggerated. And no one owns me. Once a member, always a member, Gabir fired back. You have to be joking, Cam said through her laughter. She calmed down and looked at him with a crooked smirk. Why would I respect an alpha like you? I have more respect for that woman I met yesterday. Gabir reached forward and grabbed her upper arm, tugging her toward him. Then all hell broke loose. Cam moved first, holding Gabir's wrist and twisting it, causing him to let go. Gabir's knees buckled to follow the direction of his wrist so it would not break. She held it tightly for a moment before using her free hand to send a heavy blow into Gabir's chest, pushing him back. I am not the same girl I was when you rejected me, Gabir. I've changed. I can hold my own against you any day. Cam yelled as she made a move toward him. Gabir swung at her, but Cam ducked and struck him in the middle, taking his breath away. Gabir growled, grabbed her wrist, moved it behind her back, and pushed her against the wall. Trust me, you will lose, Gabir growled lowly in her ear. She was brought back from her momentary distraction as he held her firmly against the wall. I only said I would hold my own. I never said anything about winning, she hissed as she struck him with her head and stepped hard on his foot. He let go as she twisted around with a kick aimed toward him, but Gabir ducked and swept her leg from underneath her. Cam hit the ground with a grunt just as Gabir moved to pin her down, holding her hands above her head. He stared into her eyes, trying to force her to submit. An alpha can attempt this with any wolf, regardless of their pack, using their gaze to end a fight. You will submit. Gabir growled, his face inches away from hers, his eyes dark with heated anger. Like hell I will, Cam snarled. She twisted her hips and rolled him off her. Cam was now in a position to strike back, throwing a punch toward him. She stood up as Gabir recovered from the shock. Cam took a few steps back as he stood to his feet. This Gabir was different. The explosive rage had shifted into something more profound. For once, Cam felt a ripple of genuine concern. Her back hit the wall as she realized she had been backing away from him. She swallowed deeply, her breath catching in her throat. He stood toe-to-toe with Cam, his chin almost touching her as he looked down at her. His jaw clenched as a deep breath hissed from his nose. Cam noticed something different in his eyes. Through the anger, there was a sudden, intense attraction. Before she could react, Gabir leaned in and kissed her passionately. Cam was stunned, her eyes widening. She went to push him off, but Gabir pinned her wrists against the wall. A powerful wave of emotion and instinct began to cloud her mind, taking over her actions. Gabir lifted her, and Cam wrapped her legs around his waist and her arms around his neck. Her body moved in sync with his as he held her against the wall before carrying her over to the bed. He placed her back onto the bed as he hovered over her. Gabir pulled her shirt off, leaving her in her sports bra. His eyes caught sight of the many scars littering her torso. On instinct, his fingers gently traced over them. Cam sighed as the sensation sent sparks through her nerves. Her back arched to his touch as he moved closer. He let out a quiet sound before his lips met Cam's once more. He trailed kisses down her jawline while Cam closed her eyes, tilting her head back. As the moment intensified, something in Cam's mind snapped back to the pain of the rejection. Her mind began to clear as a sharp pain in her stomach began to grow. "Wait," she whispered. The pain in her abdomen started to become unbearable. It grew more intense as she bit her lip, trying to hold back a cry. Gabir was too caught in the moment to realize she wasn't reacting in pleasure. As he moved against her, every nerve in her stomach felt as if it were on fire. "Gabir," she yelled, tears brimming in her eyes. Gabir pulled back, looking at her with worry as Cam released a scream of agony. "Cam? What's wrong?" "Cam," Gabir called out, his face pale with fear. Cam bent forward, wrapping her arms around herself. "Cam, come on, speak to me." He watched in horror as her eyes rolled back and she fell limp on the bed. "Cam? Cam, wake up." Gabir panicked, shaking her shoulders, but she did not move. He lifted her into his arms and rushed out of the room, breaking the doors in his haste as he ran down the stairs. "Someone get the doctor," he yelled to the pack as he rushed toward the medical wing. He burst into the first available room and placed Cam on the bed. A man in a white shirt rushed over to her side. "What happened?" the doctor asked, checking her vitals. "I don't know. We were fighting and then we were together, but then she just started screaming in pain." "Samuel, what is happening?" Gabir explained. Samuel hooked up a heart monitor and began his examination. "Where is her mate?" he asked. Gabir struggled to find the words. "Alpha Gabir, I need to know where her mate is." Gabir's voice broke. "She was my mate." Samuel stopped for a moment as the realization hit him. "I see," he muttered. "Then there is very little I can do. This is a serious situation." "What do you mean?" Gabir asked. "This is tied to the rejection. When a mate is rejected, they go through a period of fading. But if they begin to bond physically after that rejection," Samuel paused, looking at his alpha with fear. "So what?" Gabir demanded. "It speeds everything up." Kim said she had 6 months left. Now, that timeline has likely been cut drastically. He left Gabir alone in the room. Gabir gripped the footboard of the bed and hung his head, listening to the steady, haunting beep of the heart monitor. "I just make everything worse," he sighed. Chapter 7. Why is she not awake? "It's been a week." Gabir yelled at his theta, who kept his head lowered. Gabir had not left the room since he brought Kim here. She looked pale and lifeless. Her usual makeup had been removed, leaving her features looking as innocent as they had back in high school. "Gabir, you know there is no way for him to know that." Joel tried to reason with the alpha, who was shaking with frustration. Gabir released a deep growl that shook the room, but he stopped when the heart monitor jumped. Everyone turned to look at Cam. She was connected to a breathing machine, and as the monitor spiked again, Samuel rushed to her side. "She's waking up," he told them. Gabir walked over to the bedside and took her hand. He brushed his thumb over her cheek. "Come on, Cam. Wake up," Gabir called out softly. After a moment of silence, he felt her hand twitch. "That's it, come back to us." Her blue eyes fluttered open slowly, connecting with his. "Good morning," he whispered. Cam began to struggle with the breathing tube. Samuel stepped in to steady her. "Cam, I'm going to take the tube out. It will be uncomfortable, but bear with me," Samuel said. Once the tube was removed, Cam coughed and took a deep breath. "That was intense," she rasped, her voice hoarse. The three men offered a small, relieved chuckle. "That's a new one," Samuel said. "Most people ask where they are." "Well, I'm not exactly typical," Cam replied. "That is very true. I am Theta Samuel, the medical officer," he introduced himself, continuing to check the machines. "Nice to meet you." "But Samuel, I am not your Luna," Cam said, looking at Gabir. Gabir looked away, feeling the weight of her words. "To me you are," Samuel said firmly. "I still see you as this pack's Luna. If you gentlemen don't mind, I would like to speak with her alone." Joel nodded and left immediately. Gabir hesitated, but Cam gave him a pointed look. "Go," she ordered. Gabir sighed but nodded. "Fine, but I'll be right outside," he growled before stepping out. "How are you feeling?" Samuel asked. "Like a hot iron was shoved down my throat," she admitted. "That's normal after a week on a ventilator," Samuel explained. He was a young man, likely in his mid-20s, with a professional yet kind demeanor. "Cam, do you know why you collapsed?" Her expression darkened. "Yes." "Then you know that because of what happened, the fading process has accelerated," Samuel spoke seriously. "I've researched cases like this. Usually, the individual is left with less than a month." Cam remained silent, looking out the window at the rain on the glass. "Look, Cam," Samuel continued. "Gabir made a mistake, but you have the qualities this pack needs. Maybe the moon goddess knew what she was doing." "Maybe she made a mistake," Cam whispered. "I've spent a long time being reckless. I am a lost cause." Samuel looked at her with sympathy. "I'll give you some time alone." As he left, Cam's gaze shifted to a pile of clothes in the corner and then to the door. She saw her bike keys sitting on top of the stack. Shakily, she stood up. She managed to grab her clothes and carefully changed out of the hospital gown, moving slowly to avoid tripping the heart monitor alarm. She pulled on her dark red shirt, black jeans, and biker boots, then stuffed her keys into her pocket. She found a clipboard with a pen at the end of the bed and quickly scribbled a note. She placed it on the mattress and headed for the window. It was only one story up, and she could see her motorcycle parked right outside. "Thanks, Joel," she muttered. She took a deep breath, pulled the monitor clip off her finger, and climbed out the window. As she hit the ground, she could already hear the alarms blaring inside as the staff reacted to the flatline signal. Feeling a brief sting of guilt for the scare, she hurried to her bike. She started the engine and sped away from the pack house, not looking back as it disappeared in her mirrors. Chapter 8. Someone call the crash cart. A voice yelled in the pack hospital as Samuel talked to Gabir about what Cam had told him. That was when the heart monitor went flat in Cam's room, causing everyone to run to her room. But when they got in, everyone was baffled to find an empty bed. Gabir pushed in and looked at the empty bed and then around the room. "Where is she?" Gabir growled as Samuel handed him the clipboard with a note scribbled on it. He read the few simple words on the white paper. "Gabir, I'm sorry, do not follow me. I may or may not come back. I cannot be around you anymore at this time. Cam." Gabir growled and launched the clipboard into the wall. Joel looked at it and grabbed the board. He too read the letter and sighed just as they heard the roar of a motorbike. Gabir rushed to the window and looked out, followed by Joel, to see a motorbike drive away with familiar brown hair flying behind. "God damn it. I lost her once, and now I have lost her again." Gabir yelled as he jumped from the window. Joel quickly followed as Gabir shifted into his large, completely black wolf and ran off into the forest. Joel quickly followed suit, keeping an eye on his leader. Cam continued to drive down the road, letting the wind drift through her hair. The feeling of running settled her mind as she thought of a place to go. Then she remembered about the time when she had just run away from the pack, how she found a place where she was safe for a month before leaving for the real world. Cam finally pulled off the highway and onto a dirt track. She pushed her bike slowly over the uneven road and deeper into the dense forest that only grew thicker. The sky had grown dark, heavy clouds gathering as a misty rain settled in. She slowed her bike to a stop outside a wooden cabin covered in greenery, surrounded by mostly handmade appliances. The old wooden door opened, and an old salt and black pepper-haired Native American man walked out. His smile widened when he saw Cam slip off her bike, and Cam smiled at him as well. "Cam. Bazu," he called, placing a hand on his chest and bowing, moving his hand toward Cam. "Bazu. Grandfather, it is good to see you," Cam said, copying his movements. "And how's my child?" he asked her as he turned and walked to the campfire, where he began to get it ready to light. Even though it was raining, the grandfather had built a shelter to shield the area. "That is why I am here, grandfather. I feel I have lost my way, for I met with my past and came away defeated," Cam spoke, crouching down across from him. "I see, but you have not lost your way. Your path has merely been hidden from your sight. Your job is to find it once again." Grandfather spoke as he set the fire and settled himself on a log chair. "Now tell me, child, what has brought you here?" "I was wounded badly in a battle with 4 rogues. I was found by my old pack and held by them at first. But then Gabir showed up, and everything seemed to change. As much as I felt a pull, I resented him for all the pain he caused." Cam began the long tale of the past week, ending with a description of how her health had declined significantly. "I see you have had quite the experience since last we met," he stated as they fell into silence. "Well, you are welcome here for as long as you need." "Thank you," Cam spoke as she watched the fire burn away. A calm and peaceful silence fell over them as the fire crackled softly. An old Cherokee chief was teaching his grandson about life. "A fight is going on inside me," he said to the boy. "It is a terrible fight, and it is between 2 wolves." Grandfather spoke over the fire to Cam, who listened to his tale. The chief said, "One is evil. He is anger, envy, sorrow, regret, greed, arrogance, self-pity, guilt, resentment, inferiority, lies, false pride, superiority, self-doubt, and ego." Grandfather paused as he held onto a small twig in his left hand. The chief continued, "The other is good. He is joy, peace, love, hope, serenity, humility, kindness, benevolence, empathy, generosity, truth, compassion, and faith." Grandfather explained, holding another twig in his hand. "This same fight is going on inside you, and inside every other person, too." Cam looked at the twigs in his hand. "Which wolf will win?" she asked him. He smirked with a soft chuckle. "The one you feed." That was all he said as he put the twigs into the fire and watched them burn. Cam thought over his words and the old tale as the day turned into night. Grandfather walked over to the cabin and reappeared with a medium box in his hands. He took his seat once more and set the box on the ground before the fire. "To find your path, you must know how to find yourself," he said with a nod, then opened the box. He lifted a folded piece of cloth and placed it on his lap, unfolding it to reveal an eagle feather. He reached down to a small clay bowl and lifted it into both his hands. He muttered a few words in his traditional language before pouring water into the bowl and adding a drop from a small glass bottle. Grandfather pulled a branch from the fire as its tip burned, muttered words again, and blew the flame out, leaving it smoking with embers. He moved the smoke over the bowl, then under while chanting. He then placed the stick back into the fire and picked up the feather. Grandfather stood up and lifted the bowl to the sky in one hand and the feather in the other. Bringing them down, he walked over to Cam and circled the eagle feather over her head. He handed her the bowl from which she drank, then lifted it to the sky and handed it back to him. "Listen to the wind, it talks," grandfather muttered in a chant to Cam as she closed her eyes and listened deeply. "Listen to the silence, it speaks." She continued to do as he said, listening to the silence. "Listen to your heart, it will guide you," he called out as everything fell into silence. "Guide me to what?" Cam asked as her grandfather walked over and put everything away. "What do you desire the most, my child?" That was all he said as he turned his back and left, leaving Cam alone with the fire and her thoughts. What was it she desired most? She then smiled, knowing what she desired the most. Cam stood up, doused the fire, then rushed to her bike and started it up. She turned to the cabin and bowed for a few moments to pay respects. She jumped on her bike and drove off down the road to what she desired most at that very moment. She desired a quiet place to rest and a moment to herself. Chapter 9. What town does not have a bar? It is unheard of. Cam growled as she sat back onto her bike seat after trying to find a bar anywhere in this town. Her bike roared to life as she sped away from the boring city to the next one over. Cam watched her distance from the river Red Pack. She could not go the other way, so she had to go around her old pack and continue northward. It did not take more than half an hour before she pulled into a larger town and slowed down to scout the area. Before she came across a bar, a square building with strobe lights caught her eye. People were dressed in party attire, and a loud bass ripped through the surrounding area. Cam smirked and pulled up next to the entrance. The men in the line smiled at her as she switched off her engine and lifted herself out of the seat. "Nice bike," someone called out as Cam ran her hand through her hair, putting her keys into her pocket. As Cam walked toward the door, she noticed a man standing in the dark behind a crowd. He was on the phone as his eyes glanced at her. He seemed to panic slightly and avert his gaze when she caught him. Cam shrugged it off and continued in as the guards let her pass. "Hey, how does she get in before us?" a voice cried to the guards as Cam just laughed and walked deeper into the club. The music grew louder until the bass pulsed through her chest. Cam slipped through the dancing crowds toward the blue-lit bar. She smiled at the bartender, who had ginger hair and green eyes. "Hello," he smirked as Cam leaned onto the counter. "What is the best you have got?" Cam asked with a side smirk. He leaned closer to her. "Well, that would be the ultimate round," he smirked. "A single shot of every drink in the bar." "Sounds good," Cam said. "Must warn you, no one has ever managed it," he told her. Cam chuckled. "How about I make you a deal? If I do not drink them all, then you can douse me in water. But if I do, you have to give me a kiss." Cam smirked at him as he nodded and outstretched his hand. "Deal." He pulled out neon shot glasses and lined them up, filling them with a colorful range of liquids. "You ready?" Cam nodded and began to take the shots one by one. She stopped after the 10th. "Giving up already?" he asked. "Hell no," Cam said, and down the last 10. She felt the buzz crawl its way into her mind as he slammed down the last shot glass. "Well, there we have it. The first person to ever be able to do it." The man laughed as he cleared the empty shot glasses away. "So, what is your name?" "Cam." "You." "Troy," he said with a smirk as Cam leaned closer. "Now, about my prize," she whispered. Troy moved closer as well. "I think I can do that," Troy whispered as Cam leaned in. The moment felt familiar, but Cam's mind briefly drifted to Gabir before she pulled away with a smirk. "Can I have a double vodka and lemonade, hold the ice?" Cam asked. Troy nodded and made her drink. He placed it on the counter, holding it just out of reach. "Come home with me," Troy suggested. "Maybe." That was all she said before grabbing her drink and walking away toward the dance floor. She began to move to the beat, feeling herself tip over the edge of tipsy. The strobe lighting flickered, transforming her world into a colorful blur. Cam went to take another drink but realized she had finished it, so she headed back to the bar for another. Once she had her drink, she noticed an all-too-familiar, unpleasant scent. Cam sighed, downed her drink, and moved toward the exit, but the owners of the scent noticed her and moved to intercept. Cam turned and walked into the dancing crowds, trying to lose them. Slipping through the warm bodies, She ran into a solid chest. "Shit," she whispered, looking up to see familiar blue eyes looking down at her. Cam moved to go around him, but her arm was grabbed as she was pulled toward him. The man's hand gripped her waist, leaving her no room to run. "Now, why would you try and run from me?" His voice was deep and laced with frustration. Cam's eyes watched as the strangers moved in on her. "Gabir, not now," she spoke, trying to pull out of his grasp. "Why would that be?" he asked. "Duck," Cam told him, looking him dead in the eyes. He gave her a confused look. "Duck." Cam swiped his legs from under him. He fell to the ground just as an attacker swung a leg to kick him. Gabir was missed by the foot as Cam blocked the kick with her palm. Gabir watched as Cam quickly twisted her body and sent her own kick back, connecting with the man's face. He flew to the floor as two more men charged at Cam. As one swung a fist, Cam dropped and skidded along the ground. She turned on her feet behind him and brought him down. The club erupted into hysteria and emptied quickly. Two more attackers moved toward Cam simultaneously. "Gabir, run!" Cam yelled as she blocked two different punches. She felt a hard kick land on her stomach, sending her back toward the wall. She grunted and quickly brushed off the pain, blocking a follow-up strike. She caught her attacker's foot, taking his balance away, and he landed on his back. Cam stood up and landed a heavy punch, knocking him out. Another man ran at Cam. She tackled him and flipped him over her back. Another appeared in front of her, and she drove her knee upward before throwing him aside. A punch missed her face by millimeters as she leaned back, caught his hand, and twisted it until his shoulder gave way. She pushed him to the ground, ending the fight. Gabir watched as the dance floor, now empty and filled with fading smoke, became quiet. Cam's silhouette stood tall, and he could see her eyes looking at him. Gabir slowly stood to his feet, carefully, as if he could scare her away. He took a step toward her, only to have Cam turn and run toward the exit. "Cam, wait!" Gabir yelled as he chased after her. He was not letting her disappear again. Chapter 10. "Cam, please stop!" Gabir yelled as he ran after Cam, who burst out of the nightclub. She looked at her bike and shook her head, knowing that driving while under the influence of alcohol was dangerous. Passing it, she ran off down the street. Golden streetlights lit the road as she turned and saw the forest ahead. With a smirk, she looked behind her to see Gabir running after her, along with Joel and someone else she could not make out. She reached down and zipped up her leather jacket as her speed picked up the closer she got to the trees. "Cam," she heard the men call behind her as she ran as fast as she could. Finally, she broke through the forest line and into the cover of the woods. Her smile did not last long as she heard the men gaining on her. She leapt over a large rock and rolled for her landing before quickly taking off again. As soon as Gabir jumped to the top of the rock, he shifted in midair. His large black wolf landed on the ground easily and burst into a run toward Cam. "Great," she spoke to herself and decided to stop running. Cam slowed to a halt and kept her back to Gabir's wolf as he stopped behind her. A low growl echoed through the silent forest, a warning not to run. Joel and the other man appeared on either side of the wolf. The sound of shifting informed Cam that Gabir had turned back into his human form. Joel handed him a pair of baggy shorts from a rucksack. "Cam, just listen to me, please," Gabir asked, his voice filled with sorrow. Cam sighed and ran a hand through her hair before turning around. Gabir looked at her face properly for the first time. Her skin was paler, and she was clearly thinner than before. The shadows under her eyes showed that she was becoming weaker as time went on. "Speak," Cam muttered. Gabir stepped forward. "I know that every time you get near me, I end up hurting you. I know I have no right to ask you for your forgiveness or for what is left of your life. But please, give me a chance to fix my wrongs. Please, just give me a chance." Gabir begged her, a hand over his chest. Cam watched him closely. She looked to the ground, breathing heavily. "I do not know if I can ever forgive you for what you have done, Gabir. You hurt me beyond what you know." Cam's voice cracked. She lifted her gaze and saw the guilt in his eyes. She watched as a single tear fell as he looked down. But, in all honesty, I have grown tired of the life on the road, Cam spoke. Gabir snapped his gaze up. You have one chance. But you have a lot to make up for, so do not expect me to forgive you now. Gabir nodded and rushed toward her. Thank you, Cam. You will not regret this. He pulled her into an embrace, burying his head near her shoulder. You will not regret this, he whispered. I hope not, she whispered back, patting his back gently and leaning into the warmth. They broke apart when Joel cleared his throat, looking awkward. Can we go now? He whined. Cam chuckled and shook her head. Gabir smiled and wrapped his arm around Cam's waist, pulling her closer to his side. They all began walking back toward the pack house as a sharp pain started to grow in Cam's head. Her hand went up to her temple as she clung tightly to Gabir. Her knees buckled under her. Cam, what is wrong? Gabir asked, worried. I am fading, Cam whispered. She felt exhausted. Gabir let out a low sound of pain at her words before lifting her into his arms. Cam felt a bit awkward, but was too tired to move, so she relaxed and enjoyed the warmth emanating from him. Get some rest, Gabir rumbled lowly. Cam nodded, then remembered her bike. Reaching into her pocket, she pulled out her keys and tossed them at Joel. Joel caught them and cheered. Can two ride? He asked. Of course, but scratch it and I will be very upset, she told him. He jumped like a happy child and ran off, dragging the other man with him. Cam chuckled and looked at Gabir, who smirked. How are we getting back? She asked. Well, I brought my jeep which is just outside the forest, Gabir said with pride. Cam shook her head with a giggle. Such a boy. They fell into silence as Gabir walked toward the edge of the forest. He broke through the trees, and Cam saw the deep red open-top jeep parked at the edge of the road. He walked over to the passenger side and gently placed Cam inside before jumping into the driver's side and starting the engine. How did you find me? Cam asked as Gabir began to drive. One of my warriors was out with friends. He recognized you when you were going into the club and phoned me, Gabir explained. Cam nodded, realizing who the man on the phone had been. So I will be staying in. Cam started, a blush heating her cheeks. Gabir let off a soft chuckle. Yes, he said, knowing she meant his room. Now sleep. I will wake you when we are back. As she closed her eyes, she felt Gabir reach over and place his hand on her knee, giving it a supportive squeeze before she drifted off to sleep. Chapter 11. Cam woke up when the light drifted into the room. Her body was wrapped in something warm and firm. She blinked a few times to find Gabir sleeping with his arms securely around her waist. Cam sighed before trying to move out of the tight grip around her body, but she was unsuccessful when he just pulled her closer to his chest. Cam poked his chest with her fingers several times. Gab, she whispered gently, not wanting to startle him awake, but he seemingly refused to open his eyes. Cam sighed heavily. Gabir, let me go before I have an accident in this bed. She startled him awake, causing him to jump slightly. Cam laughed and bolted to the bathroom while Gabir grumbled under his breath. He sat up, resting his back against the headboard as he switched on the TV. He flicked through the channels as Cam walked out of the bathroom, pulling her hair into a ponytail. She sat atop the ruffled covers and looked at the screen. What are you going to watch? She asked as she relaxed. Don't know yet. I was thinking a movie, Gabir said sleepily. Cam nodded and shuffled back so she was sitting next to him. Stop. Watch that, she said quickly as Gabir stopped on a channel showing The Hobbit, An Unexpected Journey. Gabir turned his head to look at her with a raised eyebrow. Cam turned her head to look at him with her own eyebrow raised. What? You like The Hobbit? He asked. Cam smiled a large, genuine smile and nodded quickly. Hell yeah. I love everything J.R.R. Tolkien wrote. Here, check it. She rolled onto her side and lifted her shirt just enough to show a tattoo on her skin, the letters JRRT combined with an oval circle surrounding it. Gabir looked at it and traced the ink with his fingers. Do you have any other tattoos? Gabir asked. She nodded and showed him her left shoulder blade. This one held 4 black sparrows flying around a large cherry blossom branch, as if they were about to perch in it. The branch started near her side and moved up toward her neck. Gabir ran his fingers along the design. "It is beautiful," he muttered. "I want to get the branch extended down to my hip. But I have not been able to because I cannot afford it," she said. "Then allow me to pay for it." "If you want it done, then you can have it done," Gabir told her with a smile. She pulled down her shirt and turned to face him. "Really?" "Yes. In fact, let's go now." Gabir jumped out of bed and began dressing quickly. Cam laughed and followed suit. They brushed their teeth and washed up together. Cam applied her makeup, finishing with her signature red lips. "Let's go, princess," Gabir said the moment she walked out. He grabbed her hand and playfully lifted her over his shoulder as he ran down the stairs. "Gabir. Oh my God." She squealed as he rushed through the house. Members of the pack looked at them with smiles or surprise. Gabir ran through the front door to his open-top Jeep and helped Cam into the passenger seat. He hopped into the driver's seat, started the engine, and drove quickly toward the nearest tattoo parlor. He pulled into a parking space right outside the shop. "Come on," he called. They walked inside hand in hand, looking at the walls covered in artwork. A large man covered in tattoos walked over to them. "Alpha. Did not expect to see you here. What can I do for you?" he asked politely, nodding to Cam. "Jason. My partner would like her tattoo extended, and I would like to start one." "Wonderful. Alpha, you can have a look through the books to see what you would like. I must also ask, since there is no female artist here, may I have permission to work with the Luna?" he asked Gabir. Gabir looked hesitant at first, but Cam gave him a firm look, and he nodded. "Okay. So, what is it you would like extended?" Jason asked. Cam took off her jacket and showed the cherry blossom branch. The man nodded. "That seems easy enough." Gabir stood up and walked over to Jason with a book, pointing to a large design that would cover half of his back. "We can do that for you, Alpha," Jason said before calling toward the back, Hammond. "Got a customer here for you." A man walked out and greeted Gabir with a respectful nod, then looked to Jason. "You will take Alpha Gabir while I take his partner," Jason said, looking to Cam for her name. "Cam." "The Luna Cam," Jason finished. He led them to two large chairs that were side by side. Cam took one while Gabir took the other, and they turned onto their sides to face each other. They prepared the areas for tattooing, and soon the needles began their work. Throughout the session, they watched each other with large smiles. Chapter 12. What else do you want to do today? Gabir asked Cam as they left the tattoo parlor and stepped into his Jeep. Cam thought about it for a moment. "I am hungry, so something to eat?" Gabir nodded in agreement and started the engine. "What do you fancy?" he asked as he sat at a junction. "A cheeseburger," Cam called out. Gabir drove off toward the closest place that served them. He pulled into the parking lot of a small diner, and Cam wasted no time in jumping out of the Jeep. Gabir chuckled and locked the vehicle before jogging after her. He caught up to Cam and playfully picked her up by her waist, spinning her around while they both laughed. He placed her back on her feet and held her close as they walked to the door. Gabir opened the door and guided Cam in with a hand on the small of her back. "Table for two, please," Cam said to the waitress, who nodded and grabbed two menus. "Right this way." The waitress guided them to a secluded table. Gabir pulled out a chair for Cam, who smiled in thanks and sat down. They picked up the menus and looked through them. "Okay, what can I get you guys to drink?" the waitress asked, pulling out a small pad. "I will have a Diet Cola, please." Cam smiled. "A normal cola," Gabir said, looking at the menu. The waitress smiled and left them alone. Cam kicked Gabir's leg under the table, causing him to groan and look at her with a scowl. "What?" he asked, confused. "Be polite," she hissed. Gabir smiled before looking back down at the menu. "What are you going to have?" he asked. He paused and then laughed. "Wait, cheeseburger and chips?" Cam nodded, joining in with the laugh. The waitress returned with their drinks. "Okay, what can I get you guys to eat?" "2 cheeseburgers and chips, please," Gabir told her before handing back the menus. "So, I want to ask," Cam spoke, looking down at her hands. "My old house, is it still there?" "Yes, no one has touched it," Gabir said, keeping his eyes on her. Why? She asked, curious why a new family had not moved in. My father was good friends with your parents, Cam. When you disappeared, he began looking for you. He told everyone that your house was off limits and that anyone caught going inside would be punished, Gabir explained. He always knew you would come back. But he never knew why you left until you appeared again. How did he take it? Cam asked. She had heard stories of the previous leader's stance against rejection. He has not spoken to or looked at me since, Gabir muttered, looking down at the table. Silence fell over them. Cam played with her fork and knife for a moment, then Gabir changed the subject. So, what did you do when you left? For 3 days, I wandered the forests. I continued to walk aimlessly, waiting for the end. But I stumbled upon a wooden cabin in the densest part of the forest. An old Native American man appeared and offered me shelter and food, Cam said. She stopped as the waitress arrived with their food. I told him everything, and he took me under his wing, showing me how to defend myself. I stayed with him for 6 months. When I left, he gave me a pile of money he had saved. I was hesitant to take it, but he insisted I needed it more than he did. Cam took a bite of her burger as Gabir listened tentatively. I traveled for a while, but I grew more depressed as the days went by, knowing that my health was declining. I made some poor choices. I ended up drinking every night and finding other ways to numb the pain, Cam whispered, clearly not proud of that time. Gabir felt a wave of guilt. That is how I ended up like this. I got into trouble with certain groups who sent people after me. I began to wear clothes suited to running and fighting, bought a few weapons, and my style changed. I could no longer be the gentle girl I was before. I had to change and become, she began. Gabir smirked and interrupted her. Badass? He chuckled, and Cam joined in. Yeah, I guess, she whispered, finishing her meal. I spent a year fighting my way through until I stumbled back onto your territory. I gained scars and tattoos along the way, as well as a new attitude. Cam smirked as Gabir paid for the food and they left the diner. You know, I am actually really happy you came back. Because now, Gabir turned her around and leaned against the jeep, holding her hips in place. I get to make up for everything and make sure you have the best life possible. He leaned his forehead against hers. Gabir, Cam said, closing her eyes. He laughed softly and kissed her forehead. I know, princess. He opened the door so she could slip into the car, then jumped into the driver's side. Hey, do you want to see your house? Cam sighed and looked at her lap, debating whether she wanted to relive her old life. Why not? Let's do it. Gabir nodded and drove off toward her old home. Chapter 13. Gabir pulled his jeep to a stop outside an old, unkept house. The front garden was overgrown with weeds and grass, and the house paint was chipped. The blue front door was bolted shut with a new lock that Cam had not seen before. You ready? Gabir asked gently. Cam let out a deep breath and nodded. They stepped out of the jeep, and Cam walked around to stand in front of the waist-high gate. Gabir moved to her side and placed a hand on the small of her back, rubbing small circles to calm her down. You don't have to do this yet, Gabir said, making sure she did not feel pressured. Cam took another deep, shaky breath and looked at him. I have to do this, she whispered. Gabir smiled softly and squeezed her hand before she moved toward the front door. He reached into his pocket, flicked through a set of keys, and found the one he was looking for. He unbolted the door, then stepped back to let Cam lead the way. Do you mind waiting here? Cam asked, her eyes fixed on the door. No problem. Take your time. Call me if you need anything, Gabir whispered. Cam stepped forward, placed a hand on the golden handle and pushed. The door groaned as it opened into a dark, dusty hallway. There was no light apart from the dull glow filtering through the closed curtains. The place felt empty. She looked around the living room, which seemed to have lost all its color. Her memory flashed back to the Wednesday nights when she and her parents would play board games. She could almost hear their laughter as she sulked over losing. The fireplace, once the centerpiece of the home, was now cold and crumbling. Cam walked through to the kitchen and saw the same layer of dust everywhere. She remembered baking cakes and eating dinner at the center island with her mother and father. Tears welled in her eyes, but she kept them at bay as she left the kitchen and began to walk up the old wooden stairs. They complained under the weight of footsteps they had not felt in over a year. At the top, she turned toward a wooden door and hesitated. She steadied her breath, bit her lip, and pushed it open. The room was exactly as she had left it 18 months ago. Her old bed was still made with soft purple sheets. Her vanity desk was covered in a thick coat of gray dust, along with her brush and a few accessories. The purple and gray walls had faded slightly, but everything was in its place. Kim ran her hand over the desk, leaving a trail in the dust before heading toward her parents' old room. She took a struggling breath and twisted the handle. Stepping inside, she kept her eyes on the carpet before finally looking up. The dark wooden four-pillar bed stood proudly in the center of the room. The coffee-colored sheets were untouched. For a second, Kim half expected her father to lift his head with a sleepy grunt. She smirked sadly and walked over to the vanity desk. Picture frames stood in their usual spots, the images barely visible under the dust. Kim picked one up and wiped the glass. The photo brought a gentle smile to her face as tears finally began to fall. She sank onto the cushioned seat and held the frame in her hands. The picture was from her 16th birthday. Her father stood to her right, a proud smile on his face, his brown hair short and his green eyes bright. His hand was on her shoulder while his other arm was wrapped around her mother's waist. Her mother had long, curly red hair and sparkling brown eyes full of love. Kim traced her mother's face with her finger as the tears flowed freely. She heard footsteps approaching, but could not stop the crying. Gabir appeared in the doorway with a somber look. He walked over and knelt before her, taking the picture to look at it with a soft smile. "That was my 16th birthday," Kim chuckled through her tears. "I did not want a party, but they insisted." Gabir placed the picture back on the vanity and cupped her cheeks, wiping away the tears with his thumbs. "I miss them. I miss them so much," she whispered. Gabir made sure she was looking into his eyes. "Baby, do not hold it in. I am here for you," he whispered. Cam's composure finally broke. She leaned forward, sobbing into his shoulder. Gabir kissed her forehead and wrapped his arms around her tightly. He pulled her from the chair and onto his lap as they sat on the floor. He rocked her back and forth, whispering comfort until her sobs turned into quiet huffs. It did not take long for Cam to drift into a heavy, exhausted sleep in Gabir's arms. Chapter 14. Gabir carried Kim back to the pack house and up to his bedroom. He stayed with her for a moment, watching her sleep, before attending to pack business. When he finished, he returned to the room and quietly climbed into bed beside her. Pulling her small frame toward him, Kim moved so her head rested on his chest. "I am sorry," Gabir whispered, thinking she was asleep. "I never meant for you to go through this. I was foolish and naive." "Then why?" she whispered back, startling him. Gabir sighed, struggling for an answer, but he was interrupted when alarms began to blare across the packlands. "What is happening?" Kim yelled as Gabir launched himself out of bed and grabbed his clothes. "The pack is being attacked. I need you to stay here," he spoke, pulling on his boots. "No way am I staying here while there's fighting going on," Kim hissed, jumping out of bed. "I am not letting you out there where you could get hurt. It is not happening." Gabir scowled and walked toward the door. "I am your partner, Gabir. I am not staying behind," Cam yelled. Gabir turned to face her, his expression flat. "I am sorry, Cam. I cannot let you go out there." He placed his hands on her shoulders and kissed her forehead. "Please forgive me for this." Before she could react, he applied pressure to a specific nerve on her shoulder, causing her to lose consciousness. He caught her before she hit the floor and placed her gently back on the bed. He moved a strand of hair from her face and kissed her forehead one last time. "I love you," he whispered before walking out and locking the door. He focused on the pack link. "Joel, what is the situation?" "Attackers are charging the house." "I have implemented Code Blue," Joel answered. Code Blue was the emergency defense plan. Non-fighters were secured in the house while warriors formed 2 defensive lines. "I will be there in 2 minutes," Gabir said as he burst out of the house. He shifted into his enormous black wolf and ran toward the front line. He reached the forest, shifted back briefly to pull on a pair of shorts, and stepped out to face the intruders. Shift. Gabir growled at the woman, leading the group of attackers. She growled but shifted into her human form, standing with a defiant smirk. "What is your business here?" Gabir demanded. "My sources tell me a certain woman is taking refuge in your lands," the leader began. "She took out several of my people and destroyed my supplies. I am here to make her pay. You will never touch her," Gabir snarled. The woman laughed. "Ah, I see. She is your mate. That makes this perfect. If I get rid of you, the pain she feels will be worse than death." She lunged at Gabir, shifting midair. Gabir shifted and braced himself as they collided. Around them, the warriors engaged the attackers in a fierce struggle. Back in the pack house, Cam's eyes fluttered open. Memory rushed back, and she bolted for the door, only to find it locked. She pounded her fists against the wood. "You are in trouble, Gabir. As soon as I get out of here, you will regret this," she yelled in a rage. She stepped back, analyzed the door, and charged it with all her strength. The wood splintered as she broke through. She did not hesitate, following Gabir's scent with purpose. "You are in so much trouble," she hissed, running toward the fight. Chapter 15. Cam ran as fast as she could towards Gabir's scent, her boots hitting the forest floor, resonating loudly. As fast as her heart pounded, the blood through her veins was tinted with adrenaline. The forest whipped past her in a stream of blur, and the wind swooshed past her ears, causing the pumping of her blood to echo around her head. Her brown hair whipped around in different directions as she neared the sounds of fighting in the near distance. Cam edged closer to the clearing where she could now make out two central figures as silence fell over the forest. Cam let out a growl as she saw the rogue wolf she had been running from holding a shotgun to Gabir's head. They were now both in human form, and Cam could see the extent of Gabir's injuries. He was battered and bruised. Gabir knelt before the smirking woman with a content smile. His eyes were closed as if he had accepted his fate. Without slowing, Cam ran full tilt at the woman and leapt into the air. Cam brought her knee up and allowed it to collide with the woman's face, sending her flying through the air as the shotgun dropped to the ground. Cam landed with ease on the forest floor, a gentle skid, then stopped in a crouch. Cam whipped her head up to see the woman, her smirk now gone, as she sat up in pain. Cam growled again and charged. The woman jumped to her feet, wiping her nose as she braced herself for Cam's tackle. Her back hit a tree as Cam pressed her forearm against her throat and gripped her collar. "I should have known it was you, Elsie," Cam snarled, pressing her harder into the tree. "You do not know how long I have waited for you to face me yourself. But after a while, I thought you were just too cowardly." Cam moved the hand that was holding Elsie's collar and ran her forefinger down her cheek as Elsie growled at the insult. Now. You should not have been so rude to your hosting pack," Cam taunted in a voice like she was talking to a child. Elsie struggled to free herself from her tight grip. "I guess I will just have to teach you some manners," Cam whispered before punching Elsie in the stomach and releasing her hold, stepping back to allow Elsie to bend over, clutching her middle in pain. "Come on. Fight back," Cam growled to Elsie, who looked up and lunged at her full force. Cam took Elsie's tackle easily, flinging her over her shoulder. Cam turned around to face her and waited for her to stand up. Rule number 1 in combat: never attack your opponent if they are on the ground. That's it. Cam grinned as Elsie ran at her again, swinging a punch. Cam easily saw it coming and leaned back, allowing Elsie to spin around with nothing to strike. Cam brought her foot up and slammed it into her back, causing her to stagger forward. Second rule of combat: tire out your opponent. And you're meant to be the leader? And how did you get Gabir, who is an alpha, in that state? Cam said in disbelief, pointing to Gabir, who was being held up by his third in command, barely conscious. They watched the fight intently. Either he is not as good as I thought, Cam began and looked to Elsie, who was breathing heavily with an intense glare. Or you just hide behind a wall of others because you cannot win on your own. Shut up. I will end you. Elsie growled and charged again. Rule number 3 of combat: cause your opponent to be blinded by rage so they are easier to take down. Cam laughed as she caught Elsie's second punch and twisted her arm behind her back, pinning it at an odd angle. Elsie hissed in pain as Cam pushed her arm further up her back. "Oh, sweetheart, you underestimate me," Cam whispered lowly in her ear and pushed up firmly. A sharp cracking sound echoed through the air before Elsie let out a cry, her arm falling limp by her side. She collapsed to her knees from the intensity of the pain. Cam gripped Elsie's hair and pulled back. "And never, ever do I want to see you pointing a weapon at my mate's head," Cam hissed before being overcome by a coughing fit. Cam let go of Elsie and staggered back, covering her mouth as painful coughs ripped at her chest. One hand held her chest as the other covered her mouth, feeling liquid on her hand. Cam turned her head and spat onto the forest floor. "I overdid it," Cam whispered as she looked at Elsie, who was now standing and backing away with her followers. "I will be back, and you will be sorry," Elsie snarled. Cam wiped her mouth, only to spread the red stains further. "Yeah? Well then." Until next time, Cam smirked before Elsie turned and ran away with her group. Cam's back was facing the pack as she stood at the front, watching the rogues run off the territory. "Luna Cam? Are you all right?" A voice echoed behind her, coated heavily with worry. Gabir had passed out and lay on the ground, while Joel slowly walked towards Cam. "Luna?" The same voice asked again, still getting no answer. Cam never answered. Instead, her knees gave way and she tumbled to the ground. The owner of the voice rushed over, catching her mid-fall to soften the landing. He looked down at Cam's pale face with worry. Her eyes were shut and her breathing was staggered as she lay limp in his arms. "Someone get help. We need to get them both to the pack doctor now," the third in command yelled out. The others nodded and picked up the Alpha while he picked up Cam, and they all took off, running towards safety. Chapter 16. Cam slowly peeled her gritty eyes open, only to be blinded by the light in the room in which she was lying. She hissed when a dull throbbing hit her head. A hand squeezed her right hand, making Cam's eyes flicker toward it. Following the arm to its owner, she saw Gabir. Everything flashed back into her mind, the fighting, the coughing, and Gabir being unconscious. She scanned him over only to find most of his injuries were healed, except for a few cuts and scrapes on his face. "How long was I out?" Cam asked, pushing herself up into a sitting position. 2 days, Gabir whispered, moving to sit on the edge of her bed with a saddened look. "Great, another 2 days wasted of my ever-shortening life," Cam whispered. A silence fell upon them both, but it was a comfortable one. "Thank you for saving my life," Gabir muttered. He ran his thumb over her knuckles, keeping his eyes on their hands. "Gabir, look at me," Cam whispered in a soft voice. She reached out with her left hand and tilted his face up by his chin. Her hand traced his jawline and cupped his cheek, her thumb caressing his stubble. "You're my mate. I will always be there for you." Cam smiled at him softly, prompting Gabir to return the smile. "I am so sorry for everything. I know that I may never be able to make up for what I did, but I will make sure that you have the best life you can ever imagine and more," Gabir spoke, leaning into the warmth of her hand. Only on one condition, she spoke, looking at him to show she would not sway. Gabir nodded, encouraging her to go on. "Never knock me out again." "I promise, princess," he whispered before leaning his forehead onto hers. They both closed their eyes and enjoyed the contact for a moment. "Are you hungry?" Gabir asked her gently, and she nodded. Gabir pulled away, and the instant feeling of cold air rushed between them. "I will go and get you something," he whispered. He turned and walked toward the door before stopping and turning back to face her. "No running away this time," Gabir smirked playfully. "No promises," she answered back as he chuckled and left the room. Cam sighed, and her gaze fell from the door to her hands. Was what she was doing the right thing? Staying here and making Gabir take care of her weakening state, even though he had the pack to worry about? But Cam knew as well that she would not survive a day on her own. She was snapped out of her thoughts when Gabir opened the door and walked in with a tray of food. He smirked as he walked over and placed the tray on her lap. Gabir, I do not want to burden you. You are an alpha. You have a pack to take care of, Cam whispered, looking down at her food and suddenly losing her appetite. Gabir sighed and shifted, so he sat at her side, cupping both her cheeks in his hands to meet her eyes. Princess, you are not a burden to me. I have asked Joel to step up and help me out with my duties, so I have more time to give you, Gabir whispered. He placed a gentle kiss on her forehead and moved back slightly to give her room to eat. Once Cam had eaten as much as she could, she shuffled so she was lying down. Cam looked to Gabir, who sat down on a chair and let out a yawn. It was then she noticed the dark bags under his eyes. When did you last sleep? Cam asked, her face scrunching with concern. The night before the attack, he said. Cam shook her head and shuffled to the side. She patted the bed for Gabir to join her, which he did without question. Gabir took off his boots and shirt before lying down next to her, wrapping his arms around her as Cam lay her head on his chest. Gabir, where are your parents? I have not seen them in a while, Cam asked in a daze as she snuggled into his warmth. When they heard about our situation, they left on a holiday. I have not heard from them since, he muttered with a sigh. Cam moved closer to him to comfort him. Get some sleep, princess. He spoke, and that was enough for Cam to drift away into a gentle sleep, listening to his heart beating in his chest. Cam woke up a few hours later, feeling content and warm as she hugged Gabir. A soft sound of happiness escaped her as she relaxed into his hold. Good morning, princess. How are you feeling now? Gabir asked, looking down at her. Better, she mumbled. Gabir chuckled and rubbed his hand up and down her arm, kissing the top of her head. There was a gentle silence before Gabir spoke again. Cam, do you want to go out for dinner? Like a date? Cam asked with a raised eyebrow. Gabir avoided her gaze, his cheeks tinting pink. Cam smiled at his reaction with a soft chuckle. Then yes, she whispered. Gabir's eyes snapped to hers, and a smile stretched over his lips. Wonderful. Let's get you out of here and back to our room. Gabir shifted off the bed, leaving Cam cold and pouting. Gabir turned and saw her expression. What? He asked with a smirk. I was comfy, and you ruined it, she whined. Gabir chuckled and leaned down, giving her a quick peck on the lips. Cam's cheeks turned red, and she squeaked quietly, hiding under the covers. Gabir laughed as he walked out of the room, telling Cam he would be back in a minute.
Author insight. There is a specific kind of bittersweetness in playing house when you know the walls are closing in. In this chapter, we see Kamara stepping into a role she once dreamed of, the Alpha's partner out on a date, but she's doing it on her own terms, combat boots and all. As you listen, pay attention to the silence between her words. While Gabir is focused on his possessive alpha instincts and protecting her from the gaze of strangers, Cam is looking at the children in the pack and realizing the true cost of those stolen 18 months. This isn't just dinner, it's a glimpse at a life that is being served far too late.
Chapter 17. Cam growled lowly as she looked in the full-length mirror. On her thin, pale body was a blood-red loose-fitting skater dress with a belt around her middle. Cam stood glaring at the dress, her hair curled and hanging loosely down her shoulders, with her makeup done in her usual way, red lips and soft eyes. Why are you growling at yourself? You look stunning, Gabir spoke with a kind smile as he walked over to her. He stood behind Cam and placed his hands on her hips, pulling her close. I'm in a dress, she said, more like a question than a statement. Gabir chuckled, leaning his face near her neck. Yes, and you look beautiful, he began, and Cam sighed, her shoulders dropping. And before you even ask, yes, you have to wear it. Fine, but I have to wear whatever else I want, she bargained. Gabir let out a hum of thought before nodding softly. I can do that, he said with a smirk. Cam pulled out of his grip and walked over to her regular clothes. She pulled on her black leather combat boots and jacket, tugging her hair out from under the collar. You just went from beautiful to a whole new level, Gabir spoke in a deep voice, his eyes scanning over her. Yeah, well, you had your chance, Cam mumbled and turned away from him, walking out of the room. Joel stood in the middle of the hall, a bowl of food in hand, when he saw Cam. He coughed in surprise, covering his mouth. Well, he cleared his throat with a smirk. Cam glared at him as if to dare him to continue. Joel immediately looked down, causing Cam to smirk as she headed for the stairs. "Tell Gabir I will be downstairs," Cam said and skipped down the steps. Gabir walked through the door, wearing black jeans and a button-up shirt, the top buttons undone. He ran his hands through his messy brown hair and looked to Joel. "She went downstairs," Joel said. Gabir nodded in thanks and headed down. When he reached the bottom, he found Cam standing in the open doorway looking out. Gabir pulled in a deep breath and smiled softly as he walked over and wrapped his arm around her waist. He led her toward the vehicle waiting for them. Gabir opened the door for her and Cam slipped in. He jumped into the driver's seat, quickly starting the engine and moving off over the gravel driveway. "Where are we going?" Cam asked, looking out the window at the passing houses. Children played in the front gardens while their parents watched over them. Seeing this caused her heart to ache with the knowledge that she might not have enough time to have a family of her own, to see children take their first steps or grow up loved and happy. "We are going to a new Italian place that just opened," he said with a smile. Cam stayed quiet, still thinking about the life she wanted but feared she could not have. Before she knew it, Gabir pulled the car to a stop outside an attractive restaurant. He opened Cam's door and offered her a hand. "Do you have to have me attached to your hip all the time?" Cam asked, rolling her eyes. "Out in public?" "Yes. I do not like it when others stare at you," he muttered. He felt a surge of protectiveness, though he knew he had much to make up for after everything he had put her through. "Alphas," Cam whispered, continuing forward into the small restaurant. "Table for two, please," Cam smiled at the waiter. The waiter looked down at her with a lingering gaze. "Now, please," Gabir glared. As soon as the waiter met Gabir's eyes, he shrank back and quickly picked up the menus, leading them to a seat at the back. Cam sat down while Gabir pulled the waiter aside for a moment, speaking in a low, firm tone that only they could hear, making it clear that his behavior was unacceptable. "I want another server to deal with us, please," Gabir requested firmly, taking the menus and dismissing the man. Cam sighed, looking at Gabir with a raised eyebrow. "Geez, you are getting more possessive," Cam remarked as Gabir sat down and handed over her menu. "I guess I am," Gabir smirked. "Hello, my name is Mandy and I will be your server today. What can I get you to drink?" The server spoke in a kind voice. Her blonde hair was tied back, and she wore a neat black uniform with an apron. "I will have a white wine, please," Gabir asked. He then looked to Cam, who was scanning the drinks section. "I will have the red wine, please." "All right, I will bring those right over." Mandy smiled and walked away. Gabir looked at Cam with an amused smirk. "What?" Cam asked. "Never pegged you for a red wine drinker," Gabir said with a shrug. Cam faked hurt feelings, placing a hand over her chest. "I will have you know, I am very well acquainted with red wine," Cam said with pride as she went back to reading her menu. "We'll just have to test that," he smirked. Cam nodded to him, her eyes never leaving the menu.
Author's insight. The red dress paired with combat boots is the perfect visual representation of Kamara's dual nature, the softness she was born with and the hardness she had to build to survive. Gabir's possessiveness at the restaurant shows his instinctual need to reclaim her as his Luna, but Cam's silent observation of the children playing outside reveals a grief that no amount of Italian dinner can soothe. She is mourning a future she can literally see through the car window. End of chapter analysis. This chapter highlights the re-entry process into society for a woman who has lived as a ghost. Kamara's resistance to the dress isn't just about fashion, it's a resistance to the vulnerability it represents. By insisting on her leather jacket and boots, she maintains her rogue armor even while on a date with the man who rejected her. Gabir's behavior at the restaurant, aggressive, protective, and demanding, is a classic alpha trait, but it takes on a deeper meaning here. He is terrified of losing her again, and every lingering gaze from a stranger feels like a threat to the fragile time they have left. However, the most poignant part of the chapter is Cam's internal monologue about the children. It shifts the story from a romance about winning back the girl to a tragedy about the permanent consequences of a single choice. Gabir is focused on the present meal. Cam is focused on the life he took from her. Audience engagement questions. Kamara pairs a red dress with combat boots. Do you think this choice shows she's still not fully comfortable being civilized in the pack house again? Gabir is becoming intensely possessive. Is this a healthy reaction to his guilt, or is he becoming overbearing? Kamara's heartbreak over the children playing outside is a heavy moment. If there was a way to save her, do you think she would choose to stay in the pack despite the trauma? Gabir's father still hasn't reached out. Do you think a public date like this is a way for Gabir to signal to the pack that Kamara is back for good? Transition teaser. The wine is poured and the conversation is flowing, but the ghosts of the family Kamara will never have are sitting at the table with them.
Chapter 18. Gabir and Cam had a delicious meal while they chatted about minor things. Gabir smiled as they walked out of the restaurant and toward his car. But as they reached it, Gabir took hold of Cam's hand and led her right past it. "Gabir, where are we going?" Cam asked, confused, as Gabir turned and picked her up, holding her close. "You'll see," he smirked before running into the forest, Cam holding his neck as the trees zoomed by. "Gabir," Cam yelled as they quickly ascended a hill. All of a sudden, Gabir skidded to a stop and looked down at Cam, who had her face buried against his shoulder. "Look," he whispered in her ear as he set her down. Cam sighed before turning around. Her breath caught in her throat as her eyes landed on the sight before her. They stood on a cliff, looking out over a vast landscape of large, tree-covered hills. The sky was a burst of colors from the setting sun, shades of red, orange, purple, and blue. "Gabir, it's beautiful," she whispered in awe as she stepped toward the edge. The wind picked up and brushed through her long hair. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath, enjoying the feeling of being at peace rather than feeling the need to be on guard. She was brought out of her trance when arms wrapped around her waist. Gabir pulled her close to his warm body, inhaling her scent. They stood in a gentle silence as the sun retreated behind the hills. "Thank you," Cam whispered, her eyes fixed on the view. Gabir pulled back slightly to see Cam with a gentle smile, one he had not seen on her face in years. Why are you thanking me for this?" he asked softly. Cam stepped out of his embrace, watching the colors fade into a golden light. She turned to face him, the glow outlining her features. Her brown eyes looked at Gabir with nothing but gratitude. "You have taken me back in, you have given me a place to stay, and the care I needed for the remainder of my life." "Thank you." Cam smiled at him. Gabir walked up to her, placing his hands on her hips. Her eyes lifted to meet his. He reached out and put his hand gently on her cheek. "You are worth every second, Cam," Gabir whispered, looking deep into her eyes. He meant every word, truly regretting the past. Cam smiled, her eyes welling up, before letting her heart take control. She pulled herself up on her tiptoes and pressed her lips to his. Gabir instantly kissed her back, hungry for her yet moving gently, as if she might break at any moment. Tears slipped down their cheeks as they kissed, realizing the weight of their situation. Gabir reluctantly pulled away, keeping his eyes closed to savor the moment. No fighting, no snarky comments, just pure bliss. "You are so strong," Gabir whispered as the tears continued to fall, his walls finally coming down. Cam smiled softly as her hands lifted to his cheeks to gently wipe away his sorrow. "But now, I need you to be strong for me. For I can no longer do it myself," Cam whispered. Gabir nodded, taking a deep breath. His posture straightened as he looked out with a determined gaze. Cam giggled and shook her head. "But that does not mean I do not want you to show me this side of you. Sometimes, even the supporting beams need help." "Wise words, princess," Gabir whispered, kissing her forehead. The light had faded, and the stars had taken dominion over the skies. "Come on, time to head back," Gabir said. Cam nodded, resting her head on his shoulder. He lifted her into his arms and walked back through the forest. "I can barely pick up scents anymore. My eyes can barely see in the dark. My strength and speed are fading, Cam whispered sadly. I am reaching the final stages, Gabir growled low in his chest, a sound of protective frustration. He reached the vehicle, placed Cam in the seat, and then drove back to the pack house. The journey was silent. When they pulled up, Gabir lifted Cam out and carried her up to his room. Once inside, he placed her down gently and carefully removed her leather jacket. He pulled one of his clean white shirts from a drawer and walked back over. He removed her boots and her dress, slipping the oversized shirt over her thin frame. He kissed her forehead before changing and sliding into the covers beside her. He pulled Cam into his embrace, her head on his chest. Gabir, I have never said this before, but, Cam whispered, half asleep. I am scared. I am so scared. She whimpered, burying her face into his chest. He rubbed her arm comfortingly and kissed the top of her head, holding her tighter. You do not have to be. I am here, and I always will be, he whispered. They both fell into a calm sleep, held fast in each other's arms. Chapter 19. 21 days left. Has there been any news on Elsie? Gabir asked as he sat in the Alpha's office, talking to Joel and two other warriors. Cam was sitting on his lap with her head resting on his chest, taking a calm nap. Gabir's right arm was around her waist, holding her securely. No, it is almost like she just completely vanished. We have searched everywhere and come up empty-handed, Joel spoke in a frustrated tone. Keep looking. I want to know everything she does, Gabir spoke smoothly. Joel looked at a warrior who nodded and left with the other. How is she? Joel asked after a moment of silence. Gabir sighed as his eyes trailed down to Cam's sleeping form. Getting worse. Her scent is all but gone, along with her strength, Gabir spoke with pain in his voice. I'm sorry, Gabir. I really wish there was something I could do, Joel spoke softly. Another silence fell as both men watched the sleeping woman, who let out a slight shiver and buried herself closer to Gabir. Can you pass the blanket over, please? Gabir asked, pointing to the deep red blanket over the back of the sofa. Joel stood up and grabbed it, placing it over Cam. Gabir tucked her in, smoothing his hand over her forehead and giving her a soft kiss. But something struck him as odd. She was shivering, yet her skin felt as if it were boiling. Is everything all right? You look worried, Joel asked. Gabir felt Cam's forehead properly with his hand. She is burning up. Gabir shifted in his seat as Joel walked over to check. Gabir lifted her face slightly to see that she was flushed. She's getting a fever, Joel whispered. Gabir's eyes snapped up with panic. I will get Samuel. Take her to your room, Joel spoke. Gabir nodded and stood up with Cam in his arms. They walked out of the office and split ways, Gabir heading straight to his room. He rested his chin on top of Cam's head and pulled her closer. Don't worry, princess. I'm here and you are going to be just fine, he whispered. He placed her on his bed and covered her with extra blankets to help her sweat out the fever. He finished just as Samuel, the pack doctor, walked in. Alpha. The doctor nodded to Gabir and went straight to Cam. He took her temperature, checked her pulse, and her blood pressure. Will she be all right? Gabir asked quietly. It's hard to say. With her current condition, her immune system is starting to fail, resulting in these illnesses, Samuel explained. But she will be okay? Joel asked in a small voice. Samuel sighed. An illness that you or I could easily fight off could be very dangerous for her, Samuel explained. Gabir's head fell into his hands with a heavy sigh. So she might not recover from this? Joel asked, his voice breaking. She still has some time left. I believe she has enough strength to pull through this recovery, Samuel said. Gabir and Joel looked at him with a glimmer of hope. But she may take longer to heal than normal. What can we do? Joel asked. I will set up a drip to keep her nourished and hydrated. She needs to be watched 24 hours a day until she is back on her feet, Samuel said, standing up to gather his equipment. Joel looked to Gabir. We can take turns watching her. You take the first shift, Joel spoke. It's 11:25 now, so I will be back at 4. That way you can get something to eat and shower before taking over again. Gabir nodded with a hopeful smile. Sounds good to me. Joel left, and Gabir took hold of Cam's hand, running his thumb over her knuckles. "You've got to fight this, princess." "I know you're strong enough," Gabir whispered, kissing her hand. A knock sounded at the door, and Samuel returned with the medical supplies. "You know, you have changed since Cam arrived back," Samuel said as he worked. "You think?" "In what way?" Gabir asked. "You are easier to be around, less threatening. You are not so quick to lose your temper," Samuel spoke. Samuel had been around for as long as Gabir could remember, making him like an older brother. "Really?" Gabir whispered. Samuel finished setting up the drip and looked down at Cam with a saddened expression. "She has been here a little over a week, and she has changed you so much." "Gabir, promise me something," Samuel said, looking directly at him. "When the time comes, never lose the person Cam has helped you to become. Treasure it, that way you will always have her with you in your heart." "I promise. I promise I will try," Gabir's voice broke. Samuel left the room without another word. Gabir turned his gaze back to Cam. "I promise I will always keep you in my heart." "No matter what," he whispered, watching her as she slept. Chapter 20. 19 days left. "Good morning, princess. I brought you breakfast." Gabir smiled as he walked in with a large tray. Cam smiled weakly as she pushed herself up against the headboard. Gabir sat on the edge of the bed, gently placing the tray on her lap. "How are you feeling?" he asked softly. Gabir had brought her scrambled eggs and bacon along with a glass of water. A small vase on the tray held a white rose. "Better," she whispered, picking up the fork and knife to eat slowly. "Well, your appetite seems to be coming back." Gabir chuckled as he kissed the side of her head. Cam smiled while chewing a piece of bacon. "Do you want to go out today? We could go to the cinema and watch a movie," Gabir suggested. Cam's eyes snapped to him with excitement. "Really? Can we go see Magic Mike?" Cam asked. Gabir let out a low growl, a protective look flashing in his eyes. "No way. I am not letting you see that," Gabir insisted. Cam furrowed her eyebrows and glared back. "Why not?" she challenged, no longer interested in her food. "Because you should not want to see such things," Gabir said as he stood up and paced the room, running a hand through his hair. "I belong to no one," Cam told him as she set the tray aside and stood up. She wobbled slightly from a lack of strength before walking over and grabbing her clothes, which had been washed and smelled of strawberries and lilies. "Where are you going?" Gabir asked as she passed him. "To entertain myself." "Thank you for the food," she muttered, walking out of the room. Cam headed into the bathroom and locked the doors. She took a quick shower, dried off, and pulled her hair into a bun. She dressed in a white shirt and black skinny jeans, tucking the shirt into the high waist. After brushing her teeth, she stepped out into the common area. Joel was sitting on the sofa, taking up a fair amount of space. "Hey, what are you watching?" Cam asked, sitting next to him. Joel moved his arm from the back of the seat, knowing Gabir might get the wrong idea if he saw them sitting too close. "Just the news. I like to keep up with the humans," he chuckled. In the headlines today, the number of disappearances has increased, leaving the total now at 11. "The police do not have any leads and are asking people to stay off the streets after dark," the reporter announced. "You've been keeping track of these disappearances?" Cam asked. Joel nodded silently. "Do you know who is responsible?" Joel sighed heavily, resting his elbows on his knees. "Vampires," he muttered. Cam stiffened, her jaw clenching. Joel sensed her mood shift and looked at her with worry. Her eyes glazed over as she delved into her memories. Her expression became as hard as stone. "I think I know which one it is," Cam spat with venom. She stood up just as Gabir walked in, glaring at Joel to show he had overheard their conversation. "Cam, what do you mean you know which one it is?" Gabir asked. Cam stood by the large window, arms crossed. She took a breath, her chin lifting slightly. "It was 7 months ago on the northeast coastline. I was at a small cafe for coffee. 3 of them walked in and began looking for targets. I watched as they used their influence on the humans there," Cam began, looking out over the forest. "I was not about to watch them feast, so I stood up." The cafe fell silent as I put some money on the table. I turned to leave, ready to just walk away. What happened? Gabir asked, intrigued. Just as I opened the door, one of them chuckled and called me a name. I stopped and let the door close, Cam spoke, turning to face the two men. They walked over to me. One, the leader, whispered something insulting in my ear. That was all it took. Cam sighed and sat down. I used my knife on him, and the other two launched into the fight. I managed to use parts of a wooden table to end the other two. I looked at their leader as his followers dissolved into nothing. He was furious. I didn't say a word as I walked out, but his last words were a promise. Cam looked directly at Gabir with sorrow. He said he would hunt me down and take everything from me, starting with my mate. I left, thinking nothing of it. Cam sighed, dropping her gaze to the ground. And now he is back. I am sorry, she whispered. Cam, look at me. Gabir knelt in front of her. Whatever is coming, we will fight this, and we will win. Chapter 21. 18 days. Gabir, I have to go somewhere, Cam spoke as she walked into his office without knocking. Gabir looked up from his paperwork with a stern glare. Before you say no, I want you to come with me, she quickly added. Gabir opened his mouth to protest, but shut it just as fast. He seemed to ponder the thought for a while before sighing. Where to and for how long, he asked sincerely. Cam walked over to his desk and leaned against the side of a chair. We will only be gone 2 days max, Cam smirked at him, turning toward the door. Be ready in 10 minutes. We need to leave before dinner. Wait, where are we going? Gabir asked. Cam just smirked. You'll find out when we get there, she said and slipped out the door. She rushed down the stairs and toward the garage where her bike was stored. She reached the white wooden door that led into the room. To the right was a rack of hooks, each with a different key. Cam scanned the keys, her fingers hovering over her own set. Her keys hung to the right of the Alpha tag. The label on hers said Luna. It looked worn, as if someone had run a finger over the name again and again. You found your keys then, a voice called. She turned to see Joel standing there, hands in his pockets. He walked up and looked at the rack. You know, Gabir runs his finger over the Luna tag every time he takes his keys. He does it slyly, thinking no one can see. But I do every time. Cam sighed softly. Joel, does he really regret it? He tells me he does, but I think he might just be saying that because I am dying. But you are his best friend. Tell me, does he regret rejecting me? Cam, he told me the day he did it. I could see through his tough act. Rejecting you hurt him beyond belief. After he found out you had disappeared, he closed himself off. He became hard and unable to socialize like before. Every time I asked him if he was all right, I could see the pain in his eyes, Joel said. Cam felt tears sting her eyes. I can tell you this, it was the biggest mistake of his life. Not only does he have to suffer for his actions, but so does the pack. I see. But in a way, this is my fault, Cam whispered, looking at the ground. In what way? Joel asked, confused. I was not strong enough, Cam whispered. She grabbed her keys and walked through the door. As she was about to close it, Joel spoke, causing her to stop. You are beyond strong enough. Cam did not say a word as she walked further into the garage toward her bike. She sat down, placed the keys in the ignition, and let the engine roar to life. She moved out of the garage to the front door, where Gabir was waiting with a backpack and a frown. Get on, Cam called to him. He shook his head. No, we are taking my car. Cam chuckled. We can't. Where we are going, you can only reach by bike. Gabir sighed and jumped on behind her, wrapping his strong arms around her waist. You know, this should be the other way around, he whispered into her ear. Cam revved the engine and zoomed out of the driveway. Once on the main road, she increased her speed, the wind whipping past them. Gabir kept his arms tight around her, his head dipping into the nape of her neck. After a few hours, Cam slowed down and pulled into a slight turnoff. The forest grew thicker, and the tarmac disappeared into a dirt path. So where exactly are we going? Gabir asked, growing suspicious. Do you remember when I told you about being found after I ran away? Cam yelled over the wind. Yeah, you were found by a Native American, Gabir spoke. He realized then that Cam was taking him to see the man who had saved her life. 5 minutes later, Cam pulled the bike to a stop. "Listen to me, Gabir," Cam spoke as they dismounted. "Whatever grandfather says, do not argue with him." Gabir followed her toward a small wooden cabin. "Grandfather," Cam called out. An old man in traditional clothing turned the corner. Beads and feathers adorned his graying hair. "Ah, my daughter," he said. He and Cam shared a respectful greeting, placing their hands over their hearts and nodding. "How are you?" Cam asked with a smile. "As fair as I can be, my child." "And who might this be?" "I see he is another child of the moon," grandfather spoke. "Grandfather, I would like you to meet the Alpha of the Red River Pack." "Alpha Gabir," Cam introduced him. Grandfather's face went stone hard. "The man who rejected you," his voice sounded harsh. Cam answered with a simple yes. "Why did you bring him here?" "He is not welcome in my home." Grandfather turned around and walked away. Cam glanced at Gabir apologetically before following. "Grandfather, please listen," Cam begged. "Why would you bring the man who caused your suffering to the only place you are safe?" Grandfather scolded. Cam sighed, clutching her head as a dull pain grew. "You must understand. I am growing weaker every day. I asked Gabir to accompany me so that if something happened, he could take me home," Cam said heavily, her breath hitching. Gabir stepped to her side, looking down at her with concern. "Cam, I came here to ask a favor," Cam continued. "Being the Alpha's mate, I am a Luna. When a Luna dies, the pack can fall apart. I need to know if there is any way you can prevent that." Grandfather looked at her and paused to think. "I may be able to help with that." Cam took a deep breath, letting it out with a weak smile. Gabir watched as the color drained from her face, and she leaned against his shoulder. "I need to lie down," she began before falling limp. Gabir caught her before she could hit the ground. "Cam?" Grandfather walked over and examined her. "She is weakened by travel. With rest, she will be fine. Bring her inside and place her on the bed." Gabir felt like biting back at the man's tone, but he remembered Cam's warning. He bit his tongue and carried her inside. Chapter 22. 17 days left. Cam walked out of the cabin and past the fire pit. It was early morning, and the sun had only just made its appearance, golden rays filtering through the thick leaves above. Lines of light floated through the air, softly illuminating the dust. Cam continued to walk past the tree line to a small stream. She crouched at the edge, scooping up some water to drink before washing her hands and dabbing her face. "Cam?" Gabir's voice called from behind. Cam turned and stood up with a soft smile. The morning light tinted her brown hair with gold. "Good morning, Gabir," she whispered. He walked up, placed his hands on her hips, and pulled her close. Cam put her hands on his chest, leaning back slightly to look up at him. He moved his hand to her cheek with a smile. "Good morning, princess. How are you feeling?" he asked gently, kissing her forehead. "Much better. And I'm sorry about yesterday." "I guess I overdid it," Cam whispered, resting her head against his chest. He cupped the back of her head and held her in a tight embrace. "It's all right. You should not be apologizing for that." Gabir rested his cheek on top of her head. They stood there for a while, enjoying the peace and the sound of the water. "It's moments like these that I never want to end. The serenity of nature makes me realize how beautiful the world truly is," Cam muttered, burying herself deeper into his warmth. "I know, baby. I know," Gabir whispered. They stood together a while longer before Gabir suddenly picked Cam up in his arms. She let out a small yelp of surprise and wrapped her arms around his neck. "Hungry?" "I'm sure grandfather has begun cooking," Gabir spoke. Cam's expression turned sour. "Really?" she asked. "What's wrong with that?" he asked, confused by her reaction. "Clearly, you have never tried his cooking before," Cam grunted. Gabir walked back to the fire pit, where grandfather had a pot over a small fire. Just in time for breakfast," grandfather spoke as he poured a grayish liquid into 2 bowls. Gabir sat Cam down on a log and took the dishes. "Thank you." He nodded and handed one to an unsettled Cam. Gabir sat beside her and took a spoonful. The food tasted unusual, but the meat was tender. "What is this?" Gabir asked. It is raccoon stew, grandfather said. He noticed Cam playing with her food. Cam, are you not eating? No, I am not hungry, she whispered. Grandfather sighed and nodded. Once Gabir had finished the meal, he reached for the bowls to wash them, but Cam stood up and took them first. She turned and walked off before he could protest. Alpha Gabir. Let's talk. Come, grandfather spoke. Gabir followed the old man down a worn path through the trees. Cam has changed since she met you again. She is more gentle, grandfather spoke with his hands behind his back. You have caused her unbelievable amounts of pain over the past year and a half. I have seen her at her lowest points. Several times she nearly gave up on life entirely. What you are doing now does not change the fact that you caused this. You are the one who caused the pain of your mate, the one you are meant to protect. Gabir looked to the ground with a heavy heart, pained by the news of how much she had truly suffered. I know it doesn't. I know there is no way I can make up for what I have done. But I will make sure she enjoys the time she has left. I am glad to hear that, Alpha Gabir, grandfather said, stopping to look him in the eye. But listen closely. I am helping because of her and the Red River Pack, not because of you. And when Cam has passed on, I do not want to see you here again. He left Gabir alone with his thoughts. Gabir stood in silence, thinking of Cam and the things she had kept hidden about her past struggles. He made a mental note to talk to her later, then ventured back to the cabin. Cam was in the clearing, tying her hair back, when she saw him. A smile erupted on her lips. It's time to head home, she said. Gabir's eyes lit up brightly. What? Cam asked, noticing his expression. Gabir stepped forward and wrapped her in a tight embrace. You said home, he whispered softly. Cam chuckled and hugged him back. Chapter 23. 14 days. The past 3 days flew by as Gabir and Cam spent as much time together as they could. Cam went for a checkup after they returned to the pack house and was given the all-clear, given her condition. Gabir was currently working in his office while Cam sat curled up on one of the leather sofas. There was a knock at the door, then it opened gently to show Joel. Alpha, he greeted quietly when he saw Cam asleep on the sofa. Joel, sit. Do you have any information? Gabir asked in a hushed tone. Joel sat down on the opposite side of Gabir's desk. There is no news, he whispered, shaking his head. They sat in silence for a few moments. I spoke with my father. They're in Egypt visiting some friends. I told them to stay there for a while longer because of what is happening, Gabir spoke. His eyes moved to the sleeping woman. A small smile curved the edges of her mouth, a gentle look over her features. She is getting weaker by the day. She barely eats and sleeps most of the time, Gabir whispered, his voice pained. There is nothing we can do but be by her side as much as we can, Joel replied. Gabir stood up and walked over to Cam. He crouched down and brushed away a lock of her hair that had fallen over her face. I wish I could take it back. I want to give her everything, he whispered, leaning forward to place a soft kiss on her forehead. Just then, the door burst open. A frantic-looking pack warrior rushed in, sweat coating his face. Troy? What is it? Joel asked, jumping up. Cam jolted awake from the noise. They crossed the borders. They are here, the warrior panted, trying to catch his breath. Joel, get the warriors. Troy, send everyone else to the safe room, Gabir ordered quickly. The men rushed off to complete their tasks. Cam. Gabir turned to see her sitting up. He reached out and took her face into his hands. This office is as safe as the safe room. I want you to stay here. Do not open the door unless it is me or Joel, and do not leave. Fine, Cam spoke through a clenched jaw. But you must promise me something. Anything, Gabir said. Cam reached up and pulled his head toward hers until their foreheads met. Stay alive, she whispered. Now go. The pack needs you, Cam whispered, pushing him toward the door. Gabir chuckled and took one last look at her before walking out and closing the door. Cam sighed as she stood up. She fixed her red shirt and made sure it was tucked into her black jeans. She tapped the toe of her boot on the ground and pulled her hair back into a ponytail. Sorry, Gabir, but you should know better than to trust me, Cam spoke. She opened the door and checked the corridor. Seeing it was clear, she rushed down the stairs, keeping to the shadows until she reached the garage. She picked up her keys, opened the door quietly, and slipped inside. As she reached her bike, a small child's voice spoke. "Luna." Cam stiffened before turning around. A young girl, no older than 5, stood clutching her teddy bear, her small frame shaking. "Are you going to leave us?" the girl asked, tears falling from her eyes. Cam knelt down and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "There is no way I would abandon you when this is happening," she whispered with a soft smile. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to stop this, once and for all," Cam whispered, kissing the girl's forehead. "Now, go back to your mother. Stay away from anyone you do not recognize." The girl nodded and ran off. Cam opened the storage area of her bike. With a smirk, she pulled out several throwing knives and tied them to her forearms. She tucked small daggers into her boots and buckled on a belt carrying twin pistols and extra magazines. "Time to finish this," she muttered. She walked out into the garden and toward the forest line. Soon, figures with glowing red eyes began to appear. "Good warm-up," Cam smirked, drawing her pistols. "Let's have it then." As the figures sped toward her, Cam aimed and pulled the trigger, firing with precision. She saw one sneak up from her right and took it down instantly. When they grew too close for firearms, she holstered her pistols and drew the daggers from her boots. She ducked and dodged, dealing a series of sharp strikes. She grunted as a few attacks grazed her, but she held her ground. She was weak and growing tired quickly, but she continued until a deep voice called out through the air. "Well, well, Cam, how nice it is to see you again." "Nicholas," Cam hissed. Chapter 24. "Nicholas, just the one I'm hunting for," Cam smirked as she tightened her grip on her daggers. Nicholas walked forward with his right hand tucked into his pocket. He wore a dark gray suit with a white shirt, the top buttons open. His hair was styled back, and his glowing red eyes stared Cam up and down. Now, that's a bit harsh, don't you think?" His smooth voice drifted through the air. "Not harsh enough," Cam muttered, straightening her back. "Leave the pack alone." "Now, why would I do that?" "It's only fitting I take a few of your friends, seeing as you took a few of my own," Nicholas spoke, gesturing vaguely toward her. "Please, these people have done nothing but try to live." "It's me you want," Cam said, gesturing to herself. "I see. Tell you what. I will give you a choice." He spoke with ease. "We have a fight to the death. If you win, my followers will leave your pack alone, and you can live out the rest of your days." He smirked, causing Cam to growl. "And if you win? I end every single wolf here. I will start with the youngest, then I will separate mates and ensure the survivors watch as their world crumbles. I will let them live with that ruin until they no longer wish to, and only then will I finish it slowly." He spoke with a joy that chilled the air. "Fine. But when I win and kill you, your followers must leave this pack alone and never return," Cam stated, ensuring the pack's safety. "Yes," he agreed. Cam took a breath, closing her eyes. "Fine. Like hell you will," a deep, familiar voice called from behind her. "Shit," Cam muttered, rubbing her eyes with a deep groan. "Go away, Gabir. In case you didn't notice, I am trying to win the pack's freedom." Gabir stormed forward and stopped in front of her, dirt and blood coating his face as his blue eyes glared down at her. "You said you would stay inside," he snarled. "And you believed me?" "I will not stay in that room while others are fighting for my mess," Cam growled back. "Go back to my office. Right now." "We will talk about this later," Gabir hissed, grabbing her upper arm to drag her away. "Gabir, stop," Cam yelled, ripping her arm from his grasp. She looked at the ground, then up at him with a sad expression. "I'm sorry. But if it means everyone stays safe, then I will sacrifice the last days I have left happily." She lifted her hand to his cheek. "Please don't do this," Gabir whispered. "I can't let you go yet." "I'm sorry, Gabir." "Nicholas," Cam called out, pulling away. "Cam, please don't," Gabir begged. She shook her head and turned toward the smiling vampire. "Let's do this," Cam spoke with resolve. "Wonderful," Nicholas said, motioning her forward. Gabir tried to step in, but 2 vampires blocked his path. "Okay, the rules," Nicholas stated. 1. This fight is between you and me. 2. It is to the death. 3. No weapons. Vampires appeared next to Cam and stripped her of her daggers and firearms. 4. The fight stays within this circle. He pointed to the vampires surrounding them. Fine. Cam nodded. Oh, and another rule, Nicholas smirked. If your mate interferes, you automatically forfeit. You both die first, then the pack. Cam pleaded with her eyes for Gabir not to move. Fine. But I have 2 conditions. First, I want the pack to witness the fight, and I want 2 judges, 1 wolf and 1 of your own. Nicholas nodded. Your mate can call them. The beta will serve for the pack, he said. Agreed. The second request is simple. If I lose and you kill me, respect the dead. Give the pack proper burials. I don't care what you do with me, just treat them with respect. A shocked look appeared on Nicholas's face. You know, I am growing to like you. I will agree to that, and I will add a benefit. When you die, you have my word that your body will be respected and placed in a marked grave next to your mate. Cam smiled softly at him, a look of genuine kindness that Nicholas hadn't seen in a long time. He was used to hatred or submission, not a gentle smile. Thank you, Cam whispered. Nicholas shook himself out of his surprise and assumed his battle stance. Right. Let's get this over with, shall we? Chapter 25. Cam watched as Nicholas charged towards her like a bull heading for Red. She braced herself, stepping to the side just as he was about to tackle her. She stepped back several times to create distance between them. Nicholas skidded to a stop and turned back to face her. He charged again, this time in a way Cam could not escape. He swung a closed fist directly toward the right side of her jaw. Cam instantly lifted her right arm with her elbow bent at a 90-degree angle, her left hand supporting the block to stop the punch just shy of her face. She pushed his fist away, leaving him open for a single moment. But Cam did not attack yet. She stayed on the defensive as Nicholas stepped back. Cam, Gabir yelled, trying his hardest to push past the members of his pack who held him back from interfering. Nicholas swung his fists one after the other, and Cam dodged them. Nicholas growled as he went in for another punch, but he stopped when he was inches away from her blocking arm and instantly shifted his weight to connect his foot with her side. Cam grunted as she was thrown to the ground. Her side flared with a stabbing pain, and she knew he had broken at least one of her ribs. Cam scrunched her face with pain as she tried to push herself up. Weak. I thought you might have a bit of fight in you, but you really are all bark and no bite, Nicholas said, placing his foot onto her back and pushing her down heavily. He chuckled softly. Pun intended. Go away, Cam hissed as the pressure on her broken rib shot through her. Well, I guess it was fun while it lasted. I am going to have fun with your pack, he said with a smirk. He began to reach for her neck with the intent to end the fight. Cam's eyes drifted toward Gabir, whose face showed a mixture of emotions. He felt his world was about to collapse. Cam, he whispered as Nicholas placed one hand on her chin and the other on the back of her head. Goodbye, Cam, Nicholas said and began to apply pressure. Cam, Gabir yelled. Cam found a new courage and energy surged through her. No, Cam snarled as she twisted, following the direction Nicholas was turning her head. The movement caught him off guard, throwing him off her and several feet away. You think I was not attacking because I was weak? Cam asked as she ran at him, bringing a punch heavily down onto his right arm, breaking the bone. You think I would let you strike me because I cannot defend myself? Cam hissed as she kicked his right side hard, causing him to roll over several times. You think I would let you reach for my neck because I was ready to die? Cam growled, stepping toward him as Nicholas grunted, pushing himself up. Do you think I would give up when my pack's lives are at risk? Cam snarled loudly as she picked up Nicholas by his collar with all the strength she could muster. You think I would let you even think about going near my mate? Then you, Nicholas, are sorely mistaken. Cam punched his face several times before throwing him to the ground again. While you were busy on the attack, I was assessing you. I found that you mainly fight with your right side. So, the first thing I did was break your right arm and your right ribs, Cam spoke as she launched another kick into his side. I see. You may not be as weak as I first thought, Nicholas chuckled, spitting blood as he wheezed heavily. Glad you have come to your senses, Cam hissed. She went to kick him again, but he grabbed her foot and pulled. Cam fell onto her back with a thud, her head smacking against the ground. Her vision blacked out momentarily. When it returned, everything was a blur and Gabir's distant yells were the only sound she could hear. And do you think you can win? Nicholas growled as he moved to straddle her, his hands wrapping tightly around her neck, cutting off her air supply. Cam struggled to breathe, hitting his arms and trying her hardest to pry away his grip. Her body became weaker, and her hits dwindled into taps. Now it ends, Nicholas whispered as he struck her stomach, causing a severe injury. Cam's mouth flung open in pain. No, Gabir yelled as he watched Cam's hand fall limply by her side and her eyes slowly close. Her heart seemed to drift to a stop, and everything fell silent. Nicholas smirked as he pulled away. Gabir was frozen. He knew that it would not be long before he and Cam would be separated, but not this soon, not like this. Take them all, Nicholas ordered his followers as they started to pin down pack members who tried to resist. Nicholas looked to Gabir with a mocking smirk as he wiped his hand on a cloth. And him, he smirked as two followers walked toward Gabir. Gabir watched Nicholas, but then the vampire's smirk fell. His face turned pained. He grunted and groaned as his pale skin turned ashen gray and his glowing eyes dulled to black. He buckled and fell to his knees, revealing Cam standing behind him, a heart in her hand. Nicholas's heart. Never turn your back to your enemy, Cam growled as the heart dropped to the ground. He lost. You must honor your master's pledge and leave. Never return to this place again, Cam yelled. The followers turned and ran, disappearing from the packlands. Cam? Gabir asked as he watched her turn and smile at him. Everyone stood still, and Cam just looked at Gabir. You're all safe now, she whispered before dropping to the ground. Gabir's eyes grew wide as he rushed over to her. Cam. Chapter 26. Cam. Gabir yelled as he rushed over to her collapsed body and sank to his knees. He instantly picked her up and held her as close as he could. Cam? Cam? Please, Cam. Open your eyes, princess, he begged, caressing her cheek, trying to get her to wake up. Cam, he called with urgency. Cam slowly peeled her eyes open, looking tired, and smiled when she saw Gabir. Gabir. Hi, she muttered in a whisper, causing Gabir to chuckle gently through his tears. Hi, Gabir spoke back. He kissed her forehead as the pack of doctors arrived. Samuel rushed to her side and assessed the situation. Alpha, we have to get her back so we can help her. We cannot do anything here, Samuel told him quickly. Gabir nodded and stood up with Cam limp in his arms. They all rushed toward the house and the infirmary wing. Alpha, I'm sorry, but you have to stay here, Samuel told him as Gabir placed Cam onto a gurney and she was whisked away. Please, I have to be with her, Gabir begged. Samuel shook his head and held onto his Alpha's shoulders. The best thing you can do for her right now is stay here. Let us do our jobs, and we will tell you everything when we are done, Samuel said. He looked behind him and saw Joel. They both nodded to each other, and Samuel turned to run toward the room where Cam was, while Joel walked over to his best friend and Alpha. Gabir? Joel asked, placing a hand on his shoulder. It took only a second for Gabir to turn and embrace Joel tightly, crying softly into his shoulder. Joel held his friend closely and never said a word as the hours ticked slowly by. Gabir had calmed down somewhat, and both men were now sitting on the hard plastic chairs several rooms down from where Cam was. The only noise that echoed in the hall was the constant ticking of the clock on the bare cream-colored wall. The gnawing silence was eventually broken when the door opened and Samuel walked out. Samuel? How is she? Gabir stood up and rushed over to him, followed by Joel. Samuel looked down with a sigh. We managed to stop the bleeding and stitched her up, Samuel said. Gabir's heart sank slightly. But the injuries she has sustained are too serious. Samuel trailed off with a sigh before looking directly into Gabir's watering eyes. She's dying. What? Gabir asked as his world collapsed. He looked toward the door behind Samuel. "There is no way to help her?" Joel asked with a desperate voice. "We tried everything. There is nothing we can do." "She is awake, so I suggest you go and say your goodbyes while you can," Samuel said. He walked past Gabir, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder before continuing away. Joel walked over to her door. "I will be only a minute," Joel said to Gabir. Gabir stood there, unable to comprehend that his time left with Cam was now cut down to a mere few hours. He felt completely numb. "Gabir? She's asking for you," Joel said as he walked out. Gabir sucked in a breath and moved toward her room. He stopped at the open door, hearing the machines keeping her stable. He kept his eyes trained on the ground, not daring to look up. "Gabir." Her soft, cracked voice reached his ears. This pulled his eyes up to look at her lying in the bed. She looked pale and frail, her eyes dull. Her hair was pulled into a bun, looking as lifeless as she felt. She gave him a soft smile. "Cam," Gabir whispered. He walked over to her and took her hand in his. His thumb traced her knuckles as he sat on the edge of her bed. "Why did you do that? Why did you fight him?" Cam smiled and moved her other hand to cover his. "Because I don't have long to live, while the pack does. They have families and friends." "Something I never really had until I arrived back here," she muttered weakly. She reached up to lift his chin so he would face her. "I would do it 100 times over if it meant that you and the pack were safe." "I can't lose you," Gabir whispered. "I'm sorry, Gabir," Cam whispered back. They fell into a comfortable silence. Gabir let his tears flow, dripping onto their hands and the bed. "Gabir, I need you to keep my end of the deal I had with Nicholas. I need you to make sure he is buried properly," Cam told him, squeezing his hands. "I can't. Not when he is the reason for this," Gabir told her. Cam sighed and shook her head. "Gabir, I gave him my word. Do not make me break that," Cam begged. "Fine. I have one last request as well," Cam said, closing her eyes for a moment. "I don't want to die here, in a hospital room." Gabir nodded, thinking about where they could go. "I know just the place," he whispered. He began helping her remove the cables and tubes attached to her. Once she was disconnected, Gabir reached down and picked her up. Cam snuggled into his warmth as Gabir walked out of her room and down the dimly lit hall. "Where are we going?" Cam asked with a sigh. "It's a surprise," Gabir whispered gently. "One last surprise." Chapter 27. Gabir walked out of the pack house and toward the forest. He held Cam closely, not taking his eyes off her even to look where he was going. Cam rested her head gently against his chest, her eyes closed, listening to his strong heartbeat. It was a stark contrast to her own. "I'm sorry, Princess," he whispered as they broke through the tree line. "I'm fine," she muttered weakly. Gabir quickened his pace. "Just hold on, baby." "We are almost there," Gabir said, moving faster. A few moments later, they broke out of the dense trees and onto the cliff. The bursting colors in the sky signaled the setting of the sun, the last sunset Cam would see. Gabir sat on the ground near the edge, cradling Cam in his arms. "Look. You remember this place," Gabir whispered. Cam nodded and opened her eyes. "You brought me here, after our date," Cam whispered with fading strength. Gabir smiled sadly as he pulled her tighter to his shaking frame. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Her eyes closed for a few seconds before opening again to watch the horizon. "Just like you," Gabir whispered, leaning down to kiss her forehead. He looked at the woman he loved, his heart breaking as he felt her pulse slow. "I'm so sorry. I wish I could take back every wrong I have ever done to you." Gabir cried, his tears falling onto her. He felt a hand gently place itself on his cheek. He looked down into Cam's eyes, which were filled with kindness and love. "Please don't cry." "I want the last thing I see to be your smile," Cam whispered. No matter how hard he tried, he could barely muster it, but he managed a small, trembling smile for her. Cam chuckled weakly as she wiped away his tears. "Gabir," she whispered as they looked deeply into each other's eyes. "I love you. I may try to act tough, but my heart has always belonged to you." "Cam," Gabir whispered, his smile growing as his eyes filled with love. "There it is. That smile, Cam whispered, tracing his expression with her finger. I love you too, baby. So much, Gabir choked out. Gabir, she whispered, her eyes slowly dropping shut, then forcing themselves open one last time. Yeah. I forgive you, she whispered with a smile. She pulled him down to kiss her gently. The kiss was sweet and lingering, a final moment of peace between them. As they pulled apart, Cam's hand fell from his cheek. Her breathing stopped, and her heart fell silent. Cam? He whispered, waiting for her to open her eyes. Cam? He called her name louder, but there was no movement. Gabir broke into a fit of tears and buried his head into her shoulder just as the sun disappeared. He sobbed, holding her limp form as the world turned to shadow. Cam was gone. He had lost his mate, and the weight of his past choices felt heavier than ever. I'm so sorry. I love you so much, Gabir whispered, kissing her one last time. He rocked her back and forth, staring at her pale features. In the moonlight, it almost looked as though she was merely sleeping. Alpha Gabir. An old, familiar voice caused Gabir to lift his head. Grandfather walked over slowly and knelt beside them. She died a brave death, fighting for those she held close in her heart. Grandfather placed a hand on her forehead and closed his eyes in a moment of silence. Did you find a way to save her? Gabir asked, his voice pleading. I'm sorry, child. I cannot go against the laws of fate, Grandfather whispered. He pulled an eagle feather from his shirt. But I can help her pass on with blessings. He began to chant, waving the feather over Cam. The wind picked up softly, and a howl drifted on the breeze. There. The spirits of the earth will guide her. Grandfather looked down at Cam and ran his thumb from her forehead to the bridge of her nose. Her death is not in vain. I have performed an ancient blessing. The pack will live on in peace and happiness, protected by her memory. The pack will live on, Gabir whispered, moving a lock of hair away from her face. He placed his forehead against hers. I love you, Cam. I always will. We will be together again. A grave was erected a few days later, and a funeral was held. A statue in Cam's likeness was built over her resting place, serving as a pillar for the blessing that protected the pack. Her bike remained in the garage untouched, as a silent tribute to her spirit. Gabir's parents eventually returned and supported their son, seeing the depth of his regret and his growth. Joel remained by his side, helping him lead the pack through the mourning stages. Alpha Gabir visited her grave every day. Every year, on the anniversary of her passing, he hosted a celebration of her life, inviting everyone to enjoy the luxury of a peaceful life. He would place white roses on her grave in autumn, red roses in winter, and lilies in the summer. During the spring, he would sit beneath the cherry blossoms, watching the petals fall and remembering the artwork she once wore on her skin. The world continued on, oblivious primarily to the loss of a single soul. But within the Red River Pack, the memory of Cam remained a guiding light. Chapter 28. 5 years had passed since Cam passed away in Gabir's arms. In those 5 short years, the pack thrived. Even though she was not there in person, they could still feel her. Her presence was always there, nudging things in the right direction whenever trouble stirred. Gabir felt the loss of his mate deeply, but Grandfather's wisdom had tempered the pain. After a short break to mourn, Gabir returned to his work as Alpha. He managed to patch things up with Cam's parents and, soon after, received the surprising news that he was to be a big brother. His younger brother, Justin, was now 4 years old and just as spirited as Gabir had been at that age. Gabir and his high-ranking warriors had been invited to a neighboring pack to sign a treaty. The alpha of that pack, Jackson, was dying and had only a few weeks to live. With no family or pups to inherit his title, Jackson decided it was best to merge his people with Gabir's. The moment was historic. Gabir placed pen to paper, creating one of the largest packs in history. Once the signatures were finalized, Gabir and Jackson shook hands. The document was immediately taken under the guard of council warriors and members, Treaties and pack merges were serious business, overseen to ensure every detail was fair and in the best interest of the wolf community. Alpha Jackson, I am sorry for everything that has happened. I wish I could have been here to show my support sooner, Gabir said as they walked toward the front door of the pack house. I cannot fault you, Jackson told him with a weak smile. You came to my aid when it mattered. I know you've done what you could. They continued down the halls, flanked by their respective warriors. Well, Jackson, do not hesitate to call if you need anything. And I mean anything, Gabir said, standing on the steps. Drink, money, or a fight. I mean it. Thank you. All I ask is that you take care of my pack. They mean everything to me, Jackson said with a soft chuckle. Trust me, they will be welcome and well looked after. Gabir placed his hand on Jackson's shoulder in a gesture of solidarity. You don't know how much peace of mind that gives me, Jackson said. Gabir turned and walked toward his 3 silver cars. He opened the door to the middle vehicle and looked back at Jackson one last time. Goodbye, Jackson. Goodbye, Gabir, Jackson whispered. The cars filled with warriors, and the 3-hour journey home began. About 2 hours in, Gabir radioed the other vehicles. Hey, anyone hungry? He asked. A chorus of agreement came over the speaker. Then why don't we stop at Granny's for food before heading back? It took another half-hour before they pulled up and parked along the street. Granny's burgers are the best, one warrior argued as he climbed out of the car. No, the chicken pasta is clearly superior, another countered. They continued the light-hearted debate as they approached the diner. Gabir rolled his eyes with a smile, looking up at the sky for a moment to think of Cam. Save me from them, he muttered with a grin before stepping inside. The noise of his pack mates filled the room, but then a sudden silence drowned out everything. Gabir was pushed forward by the men behind him, who had stopped dead in their tracks. Gabir looked toward the counter, and his voice failed him. His jaw dropped in shock. His heart fluttered, and butterflies erupted in his stomach. His mind and his wolf went wild simultaneously. The silence around him was deafening. Tears pricked his eyes as a smile slowly grew on his lips. Time slowed until it barely moved at all. Gabir pulled in a deep breath, needing to confirm he was still breathing. He whispered only one name. Cam. Epilogue. Gabir stood frozen, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. The woman standing by the diner counter turned slowly. She was dressed in a familiar leather jacket, her brown hair falling in soft waves over her shoulders. She looked healthier, vibrant, even, but the eyes were unmistakable. Those deep brown eyes that had haunted his dreams for 5 years were now looking directly at him. You look like you've seen a ghost, Alpha, she said, her voice steady and warm, devoid of the gravelly weakness he had last heard on that cliffside. Gabir finally found his feet, stumbling forward and ignoring the gasps from his warriors. He didn't care who was watching. He reached her in 4 long strides and stopped just inches away, terrified that if he reached out, his hand would pass right through her. How? He choked out, a single tear escaping. I watched. I felt your heart stop. Cam stepped closer, closing the gap between them. She reached up, her hand warm and solid as she placed it against his cheek, exactly where she had held him 5 years ago. Grandfather, she whispered. The blessing he spoke wasn't just for the pack. He knew my spirit wasn't ready to leave you, and the earth spirits agreed. It took years for my body to knit back together, hidden away in that cabin. Gabir let out a broken sob and pulled her into him, burying his face in her neck. He breathed in deep, and for the first time in half a decade, he smelled it, the scent of strawberries and lilies, stronger than it had ever been. She wasn't just a memory anymore, she was his Luna, returned to him. I'm never letting you out of my sight again, Gabir vowed into her hair. Cam chuckled, the sound light and full of life. Better get used to it, Gab. I've got a lot of lost time to make up for. Behind them, the pack members began to cheer, a deafening roar of joy that filled the small diner. The Red River pack was finally whole again.